Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto disappears. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. The Hokage was dead tired. Not surprising, seeing as it was something like 4 in the morning. She had been sleeping peacefully when an Anbu had come by and started pounding on her door, yelling that there was something that she just had to see. "Tsunade-sama, you need to stay awake," her assistant Shizune chided softly. "I don't think that Neji-kun, of all people, would wake you up for no reason." The Godem Hokage yawned widely and obviously before propping her head on her fist and answering, "This had better be good," the blonde-haired woman grumbled, "and I mean real good. Like Naruto is back or something." Both women fell silent as they wondered what the boy they both thought of as a little brother was up to now. Or if he was even still alive. 4 years ago, Naruto had finally managed to corner Sasuke and made his attempt to bring the rogue Uchiha back to Konoha and his previous life. The attempt hadn't gone over well at all. Naruto had been brutally beaten and nearly killed. Tsunade grudgingly admitted that, if it hadn't been for the Kyuubi's healing powers, and the timely intervention of Akatsuki, her adopted little brother would be just another soul claimed by the cursed necklace that she had given to him 6 or 7 years ago. Then, the moment he had healed and recovered from the savage beating, Naruto had vanished. That had been the saddest moment Tsunade could remember since Dan died. Even her old teammate Jiraiya had been saddened. The Godem still hadn't seen the old man since he left in pursuit of his wayward former student. "Thinking about him?" said Shizune's voice. The slug Sanin looked at her, the torture of Naruto's sudden exodus clearly evident in her hazel eyes. Shizune had lost count of the number of times she had walked past her master's room at night and hear the older woman sobbing softly within. As much as they bickered and fought, the two were siblings in every way but blood. "I hated having to write his name on the missing nin list," the Hokage muttered, her voice thick with sadness, longing and self-hatred. He wanted more than anything to be Hokage, Shizune. The younger woman nodded. Everyone had known Naruto's greatest ambition. Anyone who listened to him for even 1.5 seconds knew. 'Cause the boy was always proclaiming it at the top of his considerable lungs. A soft knock at the door cut all possibility for further conversation. The transformation that went over Tsunade was astounding. In an instant she went from a tired and lost-looking, to the stern, but distantly benevolent, Hokage that had been leading the Leaf since the Sandaime died in the Sound's attempted invasion. "Enter." At that simple command, the oak doors across from the two women opened and Neji Hyuga strode into the room, the Anbu who had so rudely awakened Tsunade with him. Tsunade noted, with some satisfaction, that the Anbu looked extremely nervous. Probably fearing her wrath for not letting her get her beauty sleep. Not that she needed it, her genjutsu kept her looking 20 even though she was in her 50s. Tsunade wasn't known for aging gracefully. "Hokage-sama," the Hyuga intoned, nodding his head curtly. Shizune sighed, that was lowest bow they had ever gotten out of the boy to date. She and Sakura had a running bet to see how long it would take for someone to get him to bow, freely or forced, it didn't really matter. "What do you want, Neji-kun?" Tsunade demanded roughly. Shizune hid her face in her hand. Her master still had yet to learn the finesse that politics demanded. Did she have the cunning? Oh yes she did. Her grandfather was the Shodai Hokage after all and she was constantly outwitting vengeful debt collectors. But one could have cunning and still be as subtle as a flying anvil. Or Tsunade-sama's fist, whichever caused more damage. Shizune privately thought the fist would win and would turn the anvil into just so much scrap iron. "Hokage-sama, while on duty for the South Wall Patrol, my men were spooked by what I initially thought was a wild animal." Neji began, launching into his report. After being assured that it was no animal, I proceeded to use the Byakugan to try and see who or what was out there. "Get to the point," Tsunade grumbled. Shizune gulped, her master's infamous temper was on the rise. And ever since Naruto had left, it had been more prone to boiling than ever. Plus the fact that she had been asleep a grand total of 4 hours wasn't helping matters one bit. Not even her closest friends were safe when she was as strung out as she was right then. With that truly frightening thought, Shizune took a half step away from her cranky mentor, just in case Tsunade decided to throw something. Like that heavy mahogany desk she was currently seated behind. To his credit, the young Hyuga prodigy showed no emotion, but then, Shizune reminded herself, he rarely did. "Yes Hokage-sama," he replied in a monotone, then continued. The intruder was able to hid his or her inner coils from my bloodline. Despite herself, Tsunade felt curiosity ripple underneath the annoyance she was radiating. Very few people could outright block the legendary all-seeing white eye. I continued to observe the anomaly after I had sent my men to fetch Anbu. Just before the Anbu arrived, the thing charged the wall. Back up, Tsunade yelled suddenly, shooting to her feet, disbelief etched on her pretty face. He charged the wall. Even most foreigners knew that was a death sentence. You never charged Konohagakure's walls. Not unless you had a collective suicide wish or some freaking huge jutsu to get over it with. Neji nodded, that's correct. What happened? I'm getting to that, ma'am, he replied. At the leader's nod, he continued, he threw this at me, and he held up a rough burlapped sack with bloodstains on it. That? Shizune asked incredulously, some risked becoming a pincushion for that? She just didn't get it. No one was that crazy. Neji shook his head, not this. More of what's inside it. What's in it? Tsunade inquired, at which Neji approached her desk and handed her the sack. The Godem rolled it around before finally locating the knot that held the bag together. It had evidence of being retied. She looked at Neji with a piercing gaze. You've opened it? Yes, Hokage-sama. What is it? The fire shadow asked. You wouldn't believe me unless you see it for yourself. The Hyuga answered. That made Tsunade cock an eyebrow. It took a lot to make a Hyuga, especially this particular Hyuga, admit to that. He added, I will say that this will change all of Konoha's policies regarding Otto. That statement made Shizune and Tsunade exchange glances. What could be that earth-shattering? Let's see what it is then. Tsunade remarked and undid the knot. The next instant Shizune screamed as the contents of the sack rolled onto the Godaime's desk. Tsunade just stared at what was contained in the burlap sack. You were right, Neji-kun, she said with pure shock and disbelief coloring her tone. This changes everything. We must take steps to find whoever did this and find out what they know. What about the people? The Anbu spoke up for the first time. When his commander looked at him, he took it as a signal to continue. Hokage-sama, they fear an invasion. They need to know about this. How are you going to tell them without raising suspicion? Tsunade relaxed into the comfortable chair and took a breath that made her ample assets bounce a bit before responding simply, we don't tell them. Ignoring the shocked looks and outbursts, she continued, this is now classified beyond top secret. Anyone in this room who even speaks of this until I say otherwise will be declared an S-ranked missing nin and treated accordingly. She glared at everyone with an expression that left no room for argument. Am I clear? Yes, Hokage-sama, said the three others in the room. After everyone else had left, she gazed at the contents of the sack that still lay on her desk. As she stared at the new development, she had to hand it to whoever managed to pull this off. After all, it was not every day that someone just handed you Orochimaru's head. The authenticity still needed to be verified, of course, but the fifth really believed that it was legitimate. She was willing to bet on it. The next day had the tower in an uproar. Tsunade, Shizune, and Sakura had all met and used every medical ninjutsu they knew to try and determine if the grizzly trophy was who it appeared to be. It would be just like that bastard to send us a fake just to get our hopes up. Tsunade muttered darkly as she trailed a glowing hand over the head, trying for any slight sign that the head wasn't who it appeared to be. So far, all the tests had pointed to what the fifth really wanted to believe. Orochimaru was dead. Sakura straightened up and arched, trying to pop her back, and unintentionally displaying some of the changes that had come over her in the past few years. That seems a little unnecessary, even for him, she said with a grunt as some of her vertebrae popped. Her mentor snorted, this is Orochimaru we're talking about, Sakura. You don't know half of what that jackass would do to get his kicks. She could clearly remember him taunting her with the return of Dan and Nawaki if she would just heal his arms. If it hadn't been for Naruto's determination and reminding her of what she had left behind, Tsunade probably would have done it. Well, Tsunade-sama, I can't find a flap of skin to peel the face off. Shizune commented, I think it might really be him. The other two women just looked at the slightly desiccated snake Sanin's head. They hadn't really examined the thing with any real respect like they would have had it been someone like Kakashi or Jiraiya. And though no one present would admit it, way less respect than Naruto. The face was what they had really avoided. The head's expression wasn't remotely peaceful or bearing the trademark smirk the snake usually wore. Instead, the head had an expression of pure horror. As if Orochimaru had finally seen something to scare even him, as twisted and maniacal as he was. Sakura spoke, "What now, Tsunade-sensei?" At which the fifth pinched the bridge of her nose, thinking about what to do. Her specialty was in the healing arts, just like the other two. A post-mortem on a decapitated man really wasn't her area of expertise. "We have no choice," she answered, then reluctantly told them, "We have to take it to an specialist to get the final word. I don't know about you two, but I really don't do postmortems that often. I'm not exactly good at this." The others nodded in agreement. "Well, Hokage-sama," the doctor said carefully, "I dunno how to say this." He scratched the back of his neck with the other hand resting on his hip in a clearly troubled and puzzled pose. "There is no evidence of tampering with the, body, aside from what you and your assistants did. So what you're telling me is..." The fifth trailed off, hardly daring to believe it. It was too good to be true. "Yes, ma'am," the doc replied. Though he was a civilian doctor, at one point he had been one of Konoha's top hunter nins. If anyone could confirm the veracity of this head, it was him. Someone did the Leaf a very big favor. "What you have there is a genuine Orochimaru head." He rubbed his brilliant red hair. He had taken so many lives during his time as an Anbu hunter nin that, after he had retired, he had gone to med school and now put his skills to a truly noble use as one of the few former shinobi who would even use a jutsu again. The way the doc saw it was, you could either leave those deaths on your conscience and have nightmares for the rest of your life, or you could atone by saving lives. He had chosen the latter and never regretted his choice for a second. "Thanks, Ken," Tsunade told him, relief and elation clear in her voice. "I knew I could count on you." The doc smiled at the compliment. "You don't need to thank me. Or tell me this is classified. You have my silence. I'll see your clinic gets some extra funding in the near future." "No, Hokage-sama. Keep your money, I am just happy to help." With that and a final smile, the doc left on his way back to the office. He had given up his lunch hour to help with the request, so it wouldn't seem strange of him to leave, even if he was the only doctor in Konoha to make house calls. Problem with that excuse was the calls were infrequent at best and had to be pre-arranged with his secretary. The lunch had been a tailor-made excuse as long as the examination could happen in less than an hour. It had taken him 15 minutes to verify the identity and another 15 to make sure he was correct. If the Leaf was to mobilize and strike at Otto, he wanted to make damn sure the right lives were lost, even if he didn't agree with the method. Meanwhile, it was all Tsunade could do to keep from jumping into the air and clicking her heels together. It was true. All of it. Orochimaru was really truly dead. It had gotten to the point where she didn't think he would ever die, but he had. And hopefully he hadn't transferred to the Uchiha brat. But Ken was the best they had, and if he said it was Orochimaru, chances were way up on the odds that it was. 1 year later, the fifth was tired. She felt as if she had used her seal. Twice. In a freaking row. Her initial hope that Otto would fall apart and disband after the snake's death had been wrong. Her security on the situation had also been short-lived. Someone had found out the third Sanin's death and leaked word to Konoha's newspaper system, so she had to tell the people that, yes, Orochimaru was in fact dead, and no, she didn't know who had done it. Now reports were surfacing of Leaf Nins coming under attack during missions outside the Fire Country. She had asked the Case Cage to look into it for her. Gaara had readily agreed, but had warned that they were experiencing a surge in mission requests, and the amount of time they had to devote to the search for the cause of the attacks would take quite some time. She was half tempted to mobilize Konoha's forces right then and lead a genocide campaign on all of Rice to uproot and destroy Otogakure, but she knew that the population of Konoha, which was largely civilians and retired shinobi, would riot at such an act, not to mention what the other villages would do to them for going after Otto with only circumstantial evidence. Now she turned her attention to the other, more mysterious report on her desk. Her hand reached for the file almost automatically. The report that contained many smaller mission reports within it, all pertaining to the same subject. The possibility of a sound missing Nin. This was more rumor than hard fact, as most of the incidents involved attacks on the squad in one form or another. What was consistent was that all the teams had been saved from death by the appearance of a cloaked stranger who had a slashed sound Harai 8 plate mounted on the forehead of his cloak's hood. Kakashi had even had an encounter with the man. The copy ninja had claimed to have seen the man fight off some 15 sound by himself and not even get a nick in his cloak. The final part of Hitaki's report had mentioned, in what was clearly a puzzled tone, that the missing nin's fighting style had seemed familiar somehow. Keep that up and your face will wrinkle even more, Tsunade-heim. The woman in question jumped and hurled the file at the source of the noise. The speaker got smacked full in the face, which made papers go everywhere. Then her eyes widened as she saw who she had nailed. Jiraiya. The toad hermit rubbed his face, dislodging one paper that had settled into his snow-white hair. He grinned, and it was clear that the man himself hadn't changed much during the 5 years he had been gone. "When did you get back?" she asked. "About 20 minutes ago," the other Sannin responded. At seeing her hopeful expression, the old pervert sighed, no sign of him. The fifth's face fell and tears welled in her eyes. His trail went cold almost 2 years ago. "I've tried to pick it up, and I even asked the Sand Kid if he's stopped in Suna, but no dice." 2 years? The Slug Princess repeated, dumbfounded. Naruto had gone way underground if he could avoid Jiraiya for 5 years and keep the trail cold for another 2. Is he still even alive? Did the Akatsuki get him? "I wish I knew," said the other. He sighed and looked at the ceiling. "I've checked all the leads I can think of. I even asked Gamabunta if he'd been summoned recently. Apparently Naruto either knows not to use the summoning jutsu or just decided to forget. Either way, none of the 3 toads that Naruto usually calls has been summoned since he left. I do know that Akatsuki doesn't have him." "How can you be so sure?" the Hokage asked, hope on her face. If Akatsuki didn't have her little brother, then his odds of being alive went way up. Jiraiya laughed at the question. "You're not gonna believe it," he told her, still chuckling. Seeing her raised eyebrow, he elaborated, "They asked me." Tsunade sat bolt upright. "They did what?" she shrieked. She must have heard him wrong. "Yeah, no joke. They came into the tea shop where I had stopped, sat down and asked me. It was laced with the usual death and dismemberment threats, and it wasn't that straightforward, but yeah, they asked me where Naruto was. Even ordered tea." Jiraiya stopped to laugh again. "What did you tell them?" asked the fifth. She knew how violent the one called Hoshigaki Kisame and the traitor Uchiha Itachi could get. "I told them to go to hell and what to do when they got there," he answered, laughing again. For a moment Tsunade joined in after she got the mental image of the 3 ninjas sitting around a table, making polite conversation while drinking tea. Abruptly, Jiraiya shifted to serious mode. "So what's this I hear about a missing nin from Otto?" He watched closely as his teammate and old drinking buddy stopped laughing and fall silent. To the untrained, it looked like she was ignoring him, but Jiraiya knew better. She was going to tell him. She was just trying to figure out how. "We don't know that much," she began slowly. "Most of the teens who were saved by him were under such heavy attack that their memories of the incidents are, understandably, shaky at best. Kakashi has had the best look at him, so talking to him would probably be your best option." "I'll do that then," Jiraiya said, mostly talking out loud. He turned to leave and left Tsunade to her mounting paperwork. Jiraiya walked down the street that divided the residential district from the entertainment district. Most might think that he was on his way to do research for his little orange books, but this time, for once, that was the farthest thing from the self-proclaimed super pervert's mind. He was looking for a certain sliver-haired shinobi. He had no idea where Kakashi's usual hideouts were, but he knew the Junin generally hung out at the memorial stone, just staring at and reflecting on his teammates' deaths. He really did feel bad for the guy. Jiraiya could remember how his soul felt torn in two when Arashi Namikaze, the legend known as the Yondaime Hokage, used the Shiki Fuin to seal the Kyuubi into the boy that he would come to regard as a surrogate grandson. "Little brat," the toad Sannin fumed, leaving everyone behind to go and do something stupid. "I'm gonna kick the shit out of him if he shows his face around Konoha again." Though his thoughts were full of ominous threats, Jiraiya really was worried about the kid. No, not kid anymore. The blonde should be around 20 now. Man, it would be something to see how much the scrawny loudmouth had grown. If there was anything left when he and Tsunadeheim got through with him. And Jiraiya would bet any amount of Ryo that that Sakura chick would finish off whatever the 2 Sannin left in one of the devil. There she was. Maybe she would know where the scarecrow was at. "Sakura," he called. He saw her stop and look around for who had called her name. It was clear that she didn't know it was him, even though the two had been on a couple of missions together. With Naruto, he remembered painfully. Funny how all his best memories revolved around either the Yondaime or Naruto. Jiraiya-sama. Sakura sounded shocked. What do you want? Do you know where Kakashi is? He asked, mentally crossing his fingers. Sakura thought for a moment or two then shrugged. I dunno. Jiraiya almost face vaulted, but before she continued, try the memorial stone and check his house too. I know he hasn't been sent on a mission because he never came to get an assignment. I know cuz I was in dispatch all day today. Why? I heard that he had a close encounter with that missing nin from Otto. The toad user replied, I just wanted to see what kind of information he can give to me. Sakura nodded her understanding. Being the Hokage's apprentice had some upsides. The biggest one had to be that she occasionally heard some classified material that she wouldn't have access to just being a Junin. Good luck. Thanks, he answered as he turned to leave. Her voice stopped him one more time. Did you find any sign of Naruto? The sheer amount of hope in her voice at finally getting some wind of the wayward blonde after 5 years almost made Jiraiya want to lie to her and say that he had found him. He decided the truth was better. I haven't heard anything about him in 2 years. The trail went cold around the mist village. He couldn't look the poor girl in the eyes. Instead he just faced her, his head bowed enough that his Hirai 8 hid his eyes in its shadow. I'm sorry. Sakura felt her knees hit the ground as the old man walked off. Sure, he was a pervert, and she hated perverts, but he had always given off this aura of being an extremely competent shinobi. A few times over the 5 years the white-haired Sannin had been gone, she had heard Tsunade-sensei wishing for his spy network. Then that memory was swamped by utter weight of what the old man had told her. He couldn't find Naruto. The trail went cold around the mist village, she thought numbly, first Sasuke-kun, now Naruto. Why do all my friends seem to leave me? That was too much and she broke down and just started sobbing, the citizens around her noticing but not moving to help because they didn't want to take the time out of their busy schedules and help. On the other side of the village was a tall man with a mask covering his lower face and a leaf Hirai 8 covering his left eye, leaving him with only his right eye to observe the world around him with. He wore a standard flak vest and black bodysuit and gloves with metal plates on them, but these were shoved deep into his pockets as he stared at a giant piece of obsidian carved in the shape of something like a cross between a compass rose and a raindrop with a little sundial sprinkled in. His silver hair glinted in the noontime sun. Konoha was rather warm at noon, especially at this time of day and season, but the masked Junin didn't seem to notice the heat. He just kept staring at the stone. At one name in particular, Uchiha Obito, the donor of the Sharingan currently placed in the eye covered by the mask. Welcome back Jiraiya-sama. Kakashi spoke abruptly, not even bothering to turn around. Hell, his eye never even left Obito's name. The footsteps were consistent with the traditional wooden shoes that the Sannin had worn since the Junin had known him. Still stare at the stone for hours on end? The man in question asked with a tiny laugh. Had it been anyone else, Kakashi would have shown them what it meant to be on the receiving end of a certain jutsu that had yet to be defeated. You know that has to be some kind of complex. I'll let you know when I care. The copy ninja replied with no real emotion. Wanna hear what I did to the last guy to tell me that? He didn't particularly feel like in a talking mood right then. He was always kind of melancholy after remembering the death of his best friends. Not really, Jiraiya laughed, getting an amused snort from the other man. What the toad user said next caught Kakashi totally by surprise. What I want to hear about is the little encounter you had with a certain Otto missing nin. The white-fanged son regarded the Sannin with his visible eye. In that instant, Jiraiya really hated that damn mask that hid most of the copy nin's face. He couldn't read what Kakashi was thinking through it. Finally, after an eternity, the tall Junin sighed and responded. What's there to tell? He asked. I was on a mission and got ambushed. We've got him now. The gray camouflaged and masked Otto nin shouted to his subordinates. Before him was a tired and cut-up Sharingan Kakashi. Orochimaru would have been pleased. But unfortunately, a sneaking turncoat had cut their great leader's life short. No doubt wanting to gain favor with the Tsunade whore, pressed the attack. Kakashi grunted, the Sharingan in his eye whirling as he watched, memorized, and predicted the large squad's movements. Too bad the eye was really designed for close combat. Wasn't really worth the chakra it took to keep it active, but the leaf nin had no choice, the alternative was to be dead. He slashed the throat of an enemy who had tried to attack him from above and smacked the corpse over his shoulder in the same motion. He didn't have time to reflect on the victory of cutting the squad down another member and shorting the sound one less shinobi to use against Konoha in the future. Gotcha. The moment the copy ninja heard the voice, he ducked, snagging the arm of the fool as he sailed over Kakashi's head, then tucked in and pulled, planting the auto nin in the soil of the forest clearing where they were fighting. Now 3 ninjas leapt at him and he couldn't throw weapons fast enough to kill all of them. Chakra it is, the lanky shinobi thought grimly. Not the best way to expend his chakra, but he had no choice. His gloved hands flew together, making rapid fire seals, stopping with the sign for tiger. Kaden. Housenka no Jutsu. The tiny fireballs lanced from the area of his hidden mouth and struck all 3 of the leaping shinobi. They screamed as they were hit by the multitude of fireballs, which, upon going out, were revealed to have had shuriken hidden in them. The stars were glowing red from being heated up by the fire jutsu. A sardonic thought wondering if it hurt crossed Hitaki's mind briefly before he was once again occupied. I am going to run out of chakra, he thought desperately, just before Head Otto made a gesture and an additional 10 gray-clad shinobi leapt from their hiding places. Scratch that, I'm going to die. Kakashi paid dearly for his mental lapse. A blow from one of the new arrivals caught him off guard and the mighty Junin flew through the air to slam into the ground a couple feet away. Dimly he heard the leader cry for his men to kill the Sharingan wielder. The world seemed to stop spinning as he heard the footsteps of the Shinigami coming for his soul. Arashi-sensei, Obito, Ren. One by one his comrades' faces flashed by in front of him as Kakashi remembered the team he had lost and felt a little happy that he would see them one more time. I don't think so, a new voice said. Kunai flashed from nowhere and impaled every auto nin in the neck except for the leader. As Hitaki struggled back to his feet, a blur streaked from a tree to his left and landed in crouch. It took Kakashi a moment to realize that the figure in front of him had no shape. Then he realized that the stranger was wearing a black traveling cloak that completely hid his form by trailing to within just a few inches of the ground. His cloak's hood was up and when he turned around, Kakashi saw with a start that hood concealed the man's entire face with the exception of his mouth. The cloak's only feature was the slashed Otogakure Harai 8 plate fixed to the area where the man's forehead would have been. You alright, Hitaki-san? The man asked. Personally, Kakashi thought that it was more of a demand than a question, but the man was from Otto and was asking about his health. Add in the fact that he had just saved the Junin's ass and he supposed he could let it slide. Yeah, the other replied, working his neck to try and get ache that had developed when he had landed from the strike to the jaw. Just who the hell are you, if you don't mind me asking? The cloaked man snorted softly as he turned back to the only remaining sound ninja left. Just passing through, he replied in a low monotone, thought I'd give you a hand. Thanks, Kakashi said, his gratitude real. He really thanked whatever kami was watching over him. The deity had sent the right blessing at the right time. What do you want? It was obvious the man wanted something because he had risked coming to the aid of a potential hostile. What would the man have done if Kakashi was still in Anbu? What do I want? The missing nin repeated softly, a low silky tone that promised bad things to his enemies. Kakashi was suddenly glad that that killing intent the stranger was radiating wasn't directed at him. The man continued, I only want to wipe Otogakure from existence. Traitor! The Auto Nin shouted, Orochimaru-sama granted you a home when you had none. And now you repay us by slaughtering our men and making things defeat. That was as far as the man got before he was cut off by a kunai embedding itself in his neck. From the side, Kakashi yelled at himself. Just as he thought that, a second cloaked man dropped from the trees. Hitaki thought for an instant that there were 2 auto missing nins running around. Then the new arrival poofed out of existence in a cloud of ninja smoke. Kage Bunshin, this guy is good. I didn't sense the attack coming or even where the clone was hiding. Later, the voice made the stunned Junin jump. The man had started to walk away, his cloak rippling in the wind that his movement made. Wait, Kakashi called, and was surprised to see the man actually stop and make a half-turn back to him. Why don't you come with me to Konoha? We could use someone who has your experience with the sound. It was a moment before the man replied, sorry. No, I still have unfinished business with their bastard leader. The man resumed his walk away from the other ninja. Who's the leader? Kakashi yelled after him. The man blurred out of sight, but not before his answer was carried back to him on the wind. Uchiha Sasuke. Jiraiya just stared at the copycat ninja as he fell silent, evidently done with his story. He sighed just before he spoke, all of his usual lightheartedness gone. Naruto is gonna be pissed. Kakashi just nodded at the statement before he asked a question he had feared since his student and friend had vanished without so much as a goodbye. You think he's dead? The masked ninja asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Jiraiya shook his head slowly. No, I haven't managed to find much of a trail, but all evidence I have has pointed to the strong probability that our favorite pain in the ass is still out there, the older ninja replied. He really hoped so. To lose both Arashi and Naruto? That would make him pull a Tsunade and leave the village. How long ago did you lose his trail? Kakashi inquired. The Hokage had told him that the Toad Hermit had lost the trail 2 years ago, but something told the masked ninja that Jiraiya was hiding something. His suspicions were confirmed by Jiraiya letting out another sigh and looking at him with guarded eyes. I told Tsunade Haim and Sakura-san 2 years ago, he said slowly. Kakashi had a feeling that the old ninja was about to tell him something so big that he'd even lied to his oldest friend and leader to avoid disclosing it. Kakashi realized that Jiraiya was speaking again, but the truth is, I lost the trail 2.5 years ago. I told the other two just 2 years because I didn't think that they could handle it. That was the wrong thing to do and you know it, Jiraiya-sama, Kakashi told him sternly. You know that Tsunade-sama will have your hide for wallpaper if she ever finds out. The look Jiraiya gave him told the copy nin that the older man had already thought about all of this. Kakashi shrugged and returned his focus to the memorial stone, focusing on the name of Namikaze Arashi. Jiraiya, for his part, noticed the lapse of the other shinobi's attention and knew that he was done here. Kakashi was reliving his past again, but the Sannin didn't bother to bring him out of it again. He had what he needed. Now his next task would be to try and find this sound missing nin and see if he couldn't try and convince him to come to Konoha and tell little Morino Ibiki all he knew. Willing or not didn't matter much to the old ninja and he knew the sadist Ibiki just wouldn't give a damn. Far away from these transpiring events, deep in the rice country, Uchiha Sasuke, mighty and great leader of the Sound, was busy torturing a poor leaf ninja who had foolishly wandered into his domain. The man screamed again, a horrible sound that brought a truly evil and insane-looking grin to the Avenger's face. Now will you tell me of Konoha's defenses? The Uchiha asked, his voice sickly sweet as he interrogated the writhing shinobi. If you do, I may make your death quick and painless. Chidori blazed to life in his hand to illustrate his point. It was that annoying pervert Kakashi's only original just you and had been copied by Sasuke and his Sharingan. Ah yes, the almighty Sharingan. The lone Uchiha had long since mastered the bloodline, but had yet to attain the purest form of his Kekkei Genkai, the Mangenkyo Sharingan. He'd had the Uzumaki bastard in his grasp not too long ago, but somehow, the annoying dead last had somehow survived. And no matter how many of his former allies he captured, tortured, or killed, none could tell him why. So now he was going to break Konohagakure's walls down and raise the only link to his past he had left. The weak leaf shinobi looked him straight in the eye. Go, to, hell, Uchi. Huh? The man gasped out at him, spitting at him after he had breathed his last, defiant, statement. Sasuke's rage erupted and the Chidori chirping in his hand blazed so bright, the dark room the two were in was dimly illuminated in a pale, flickering, blue light. Next moment and the walls were coated with a dark fluid as the former Konoha nin slammed his lightning-enhanced fist through the man's stomach. The poor shinobi screamed long and loud. Louder than he'd ever done in the 2 weeks or so he'd been the Uchiha's plaything. Once the awful sound had died down, Sasuke removed his hand and let the man collapse, his blood dripping off the Uchiha's hand and pooling on the floor. Kabuto, he raged and the traitor poofed in right next to his furious leader. Like he'd done with Orochimaru, Kabuto kept a mask of calm and level-headedness around Sasuke no matter what the man's mood. Yes, man, 5 years had aged the Uchiha from just a teenager wanting power, to a man who had it and was going to use it to get what he wanted. You called Sasuke-sama? Kabuto inquired, his voice gentle and subservient. As much as he wanted to kill the arrogant bastard and take the leadership of the sound for himself, Kabuto knew that it was no longer possible. Sasuke was potentially even stronger than his twisted one-time master had been. If that was true, the Leaf and the fool who led them, Tsunade, wouldn't be able to withstand the destruction the spoiled missing nin so desperately wanted to unleash on them. Mobilize our army, the brat growled. He would do what the cowardly snake couldn't do and raise the Leaf from existence. Then, once the last connection to his past had been utterly destroyed and stricken from history, Sasuke would hunt down his brother and turn that smirk into a small pile of lightning-crisp ash. We will march on the Leaf as soon as we can. Shock coursed through Kabuto. Was the brat so eager to lead them all to their deaths? All the Leaf shinobi that Sasuke had personally tortured had told him nothing. Marching on Konoha would be a suicidal endeavor. Sasuke-sama, I must protest. The Med Nin exclaimed, you know nothing of the Leaf village's defenses. We will be exterminated by the Anbu like so many annoying mosquitoes. He quailed under the furious gaze of the Sharingan. That is why I will kill the Hokage in a one-on-one duel. Then the Leaf will be forced to retreat into their own demise where we will kill them all. Kabuto mentally shook his head at the foolish, insane plan. The Leaf would be galvanized by the death of Tsunade and fight back even harder. That didn't even take into account the village's usual tanks, like the Hyugas, especially that damn brat Neji, Jiraiya-sama and Kakashi. The fashion-challenged fool Maida Guy and his equally powerful student Rock Lee. Plus, even though Tsunade was old, she had two loyal students, one who had learned her inhumanly powerful strength. They would be the ones who would be wiped out, not Konohagakure. You will mobilize all our forces, Sasuke said in a low voice. We move in 3 days. No less. He gestured with a blood-coated hand and Kabuto bowed low before using Shunshin no Jutsu to get the various balls rolling. He would have to come up with a strategy, since their supposedly great leader had none. Kabuto smiled evilly as he sprinted through the halls of their underground haven. Maybe he could use this as a way to catapult himself to the top and wipe out Konohagakure no Sato in one fell swoop. Deep within the barren and dry wind country, a panda-eyed man with teal eyes and red hair stopped and turned to face the wind that was howling across the sand dunes. There is a foul scent on the wind. Something is about to transpire that will shake the world, he thought, his mind blissfully free from any adverse pressure from the demon who used to reside within him. Now, Shukaku was gone, taken by the Akatsuki, leaving Gaara of the desert in full command of his body, mind, and sanity for the first time in his life. His two companions, his puppet-using brother Kankuro and his wind-manipulating sister, Temari, both stopped walking and turned to look at their younger brother, who had abruptly stopped walking and was staring into the hot and gritty wind with no real outward sign. He noticed the fine sand grains in the wind peppering his skin. Gaara? Temari asked, exchanging a puzzled glance with Kankuro. Temari had matured in recent years. She no longer got so pissed off during a battle and wore a loose white top that showed her cleavage, covered by a fishnet underlayer. A blue sash kept her shirt from blowing around too much and also held her massive fan. Her loose skirt came to mid-thigh and was functional enough for her to wear it and not have it restrict her movement so much. She knew that all the jumping around shinobi did would give the eager watcher many chances to observe her underwear, so she wore her old black compression shorts under the skirt to take away the flashing issue. What's up? Kankuro prodded, trying to get an answer out of their stoic little brother. He was a puppet master now and so no longer painted his face. He also had quit wearing his Suna Harai 8 like a hood, instead wearing it the standard shinobi way, around the forehead, allowing his shaggy brown hair to spill over it in a way that didn't look that bad all. At least that's what the girls of the village kept telling him. He himself didn't really care. So he said, "We're returning to Suna," Gaara said tonelessly, turning his back on the other two and beginning to walk back towards Suna, nearly 3.5 days away. Gaara! The two other sand siblings yelled, shocked and outraged that their cage would drag them all the way out to this Kami-forsaken area of wind country to train only turn back, when their destination was just coming into view. A little oasis that was far off the beaten path so no one would interrupt. Gaara had even gone as far as to leave Baki in charge so he could get away from his cage duties long enough for the trio to spend some time beating on each other. The Godem case cage had been actually learning other jutsu and was getting to be quite proficient with them, and was also starting to pick up some decent taijutsu moves to boot. Since Gaara's demon had been extracted, his sand, while still powerful, wasn't nearly as effective as before, and his sand shield didn't respond to attacks automatically. On the plus side though, all of the former Jinchuriki's dangerous and deadly sand just were still usable, so the man wasn't completely starting over. "Why are we going back?" Kankuro howled at his little brothers retreating back. "We're nearly there now and Baki has things handled back home. This is the first time you've had time off for months and you're just going to go back?" Tamari couldn't understand it either, but then Gaara seemed to be in one of his moods, so it would be tough getting a straight answer out of him. He also had a tendency to revert to his old kill first ask later personality. "Careful, Kankuro," Tamari warned, "he's in one of his moods. You know how he gets." Kankuro paled visibly and started watching Gaara for signs of swirling sand grains near that massive gourd on his back. Gaara, for his part, didn't do anything, but just kept walking, but his voice did manage to reach them, even if he was almost out of earshot. "I have a bad feeling. Something's about to happen. We need to prepare," the redhead replied simply as he continued his trek back to Suna. The other two exchanged glances and sprinted to catch up with him. Even if Gaara was acting on a hunch, his hunches about stuff like this generally turned out to be right. Tamari could only hope that Uzumaki Naruto wasn't in trouble, because if he was, then whoever had messed with Gaara's best and first friend would feel the wrath of one very pissed Jinchuriki. "All forces are ready to move on your signal, Sasuke-sama," Kabuto said in his usual arrogant voice. Sasuke nodded curtly as he strapped on Kusanagi and a black, pocketless flak vest. He adjusted the vest and stepped to the edge of the balcony that overlooked the huge room that was serving as the staging area for his glorious invasion of Konohagakure. At the sight their leader, the entire army burst out into chants and cheers. "We move in 2 hours, not a minute later," Sasuke said icily as he acknowledged the cheers. It was important for the troops to be psyched up, otherwise they would falter and fail the moment Tsunade set foot on the battlefield. "Make it happen or I will end your miserable life." Kabuto fought hard to avoid gnashing his teeth at the brat's misplaced arrogance as he responded with a submissive, "Yes, Sasuke-sama," and departed to find the commanders of the army so they could get this doomed show on the road. "Enjoy your puffed-up power play while you can, you bastard," he though, smiling as he envisioned Sasuke getting his ass handed to him by the Kunoichi Sannin. "Your death will be my chance to rise to the head of this rat's nest and make it a true fighting force." He began to laugh to himself as he walked down the halls, continued daydreams of a dead Sasuke and a conquered world dancing in his mind's eye. An hour and 50 minutes later, the massive army of Otogakure spewed forth from the concealed entrance to the underground fortress like so many locusts, setting a course for Fire Country with the intent on seeing it live up to its namesake and burn. On the plains of Grass Country, two men with slashed Harai Atesh and black jacket-like cloaks with red clouds all over them stopped walking and stared at the dark blur in the distance that marked where the Grass Country ended and Fire Country began. The dark blur was where the huge redwood forests of western portion of that nation and covered the whole nation. The shorter of the two stopped and squinted as the wind blew his long black bangs into his face. The other one looked unusually like a shark that had decided to leave the sea and walk on land. His real defining feature was the giant, bandage-wrapped, sword strapped to his back. Hoshigaki Kisame watched his partner within the Akatsuki carefully. It was hard to read him on the best of days, and today was no different. He wanted what they would do about the Oto army headed for Konoha, but asking Itachi when he was like this was like asking for him to run his hand through your chest. But Kisame hadn't gotten where he was by being timid and not taking chances, so he asked, "What are we gonna do about that army, Itachi?" He asked. "If Sasori's spy is telling the truth, then there's a good chance that Konoha will be destroyed and we'll never find the fox brat." The dead Akatsuki's spy had continued to provide good information to them, so they had allowed him to remain in his current station. Now the shark man was wondering if the red-eyed prodigy from Konoha was going to kill him for interrupting his thoughts. "You truly are a fool," Itachi murmured in his usual monotone. "The sound is marching straight into their own demise. My extraordinarily stupid little brother is going to die and Konohagakure will endure to fight another day." He resumed his walk, his Sharingan flitting in the direction he knew his former village to be, and turned his back to it and headed off in another direction. Come Kisame, we must find Naruto-kun sometime before the turn of the next century. You're not kidding Itachi. Where the hell did that brat go? The other cloaked man wondered to himself. The last thing he had expected out of the stoic Uchiha was a response. That is what we must find out, he said in his soft voice. If he can fool even that pervert Sanin, he must have improved his skills immensely over the past 5 years. We must be cautious or he may find a way to kill us. Kisame blinked owlishly, shocked that he'd actually be answered and lived to tell about it, before taking a couple bounding steps to catch up to his partner before Itachi left him behind. A few miles south of the two missing nins, a border patrol was moving near the road that divided the two countries. One of them had a massive white dog the size of a horse. It let out a booming bark and the patrol halted. Akamaru started to sniff into the wind and let out a softer yip than his body should have allowed. What do you mean you smell Sasuke? Inuzuka Kiba asked his pet, tool and partner. He hasn't been seen in Fire Country since he left. Akamaru whimpered and nudged his master with his nose. Kiba absently scratched his massive dog's muzzle as he sniffed the air himself, putting his famed nose to work. The 20-year-old hadn't changed much since Naruto had left, but he had lost his jacket in exchange for a sleeveless black t-shirt and black pants with the standard shinobi accessories. He hated border patrol, but Kurenai had insisted on getting her old team together for a mission to relive the old days when they had been newbie genin just starting out on the path of the ninja. What is wrong with Akamaru? Aburame Shino asked, his voice giving away nothing. The man had kept the same outfit he'd had 5 years ago. No surprise, seeing as Shino himself rarely did anything that was radical. The only change to him was his sunglasses. Now they were streamlined and sleek, but Kiba privately thought that they were even darker than the other two pairs, if that was even possible. Dunno. He says he smells Sasuke, but I don't smell anything at all, the other shinobi answered. Kurenai came over to see what the two boys were talking about. What's wrong? She asked, her crimson eyes flicking from one to the other. Kurenai hadn't changed her look at all. Kiba knew it was one of her ways of holding on to Asuma's memory. She had even given her little boy his shirt with the kanji for fire on it. Akamaru claims to have scented Uchiha Sasuke, Shino stated. Kiba smells nothing. Kurenai allowed her skepticism to show on her face. Kiba usually could pick up the smells Akamaru found with no real problem. Are you sure, Akamaru? She asked, questioning the dog directly. She had learned long ago that the dog was nearly human. And given that one of Kiba's relatives had a dog that could talk, Kurenai believed that dogs were more human than they appeared. Just look at one of Kakashi's ninkin, Pakun. The dog whimpered and barked again. He says he's sure of it, Kiba translated, clearly puzzled by his lack of being able to pick up the scent. The Inuzuka really wished that Hinata was there right at that moment, but the shy girl had been married off to some minor, but wealthy, lord by her father in order to bring more revenue into Konoha, so they weren't as dependent on missions, so even if they lost a lot of shinobi like during the invasion, they could still function. Just thinking about what the Hyuga's head had done made his blood boil. But, if the rumors were true, that had been nothing compared to her cousin Neji's fury. The rumor said that Hiyashi had been forced to activate Neji's seal to keep the branch member from killing him during a vicious sparring match. It is unfortunate that Hinata is not here right now, Shino murmured softly, the stoic boy unknowingly voicing Kiba's unspoken wish. Kiba started to agree with the bug user, but Akamaru suddenly started growling in a low, tense tone. That didn't need any translation by Kiba. In a flash, all three were in a defensive stance with weapons in their hands, straining to see the enemy. Kiba's nose suddenly twitched. His eyes widened as he caught the scent of too many people to count. Shit, he yelled, finally picking up what Akamaru had been so insistent on. We gotta get outta here now. Why? Kurenai demanded, her hands already moving, making seal after seal as she set up genjutsu traps all around them to slow down whatever was coming. There's an army coming, Kiba cried, that's why I couldn't pick up Sasuke bastard's scent. It was hidden by nature and by all the other smells. The patrol wasted no time in shooting back to Konoha as fast as they could, Kiba flipping his teammates soldier pills so they would be able to keep up the pace. As they ran, Kurenai scribbled down a hasty message, addressed it directly to Tsunade-sama. and tossed it to Akamaru, who caught it in his mouth and sprinted on ahead, moving faster than any of the three humans could have managed. Deep within the inhospitable mountains of the aptly named mountain country, a tall man with long, shaggy, spiky blonde hair and haunted blue eyes stared out the flimsy window of the ramshackle shack he had been living in for the last year. There was currently a whiteout blizzard going on, but the man didn't even feel it, probably because of the fire that blazed in the fieldstone hearth behind him. He reached up and scratched an itch on his cheek. When his hand lowered, it revealed 3 whisker-like marks on his cheek, which matched the other 3 on the other side. Yes, this was Uzumaki Naruto, after 5 years of being away from his friends. Well, almost all. He'd made a new friend, if one really stretched the definition. More like a trustable ally, but the Jinchuriki knew that the fox was just happy to get out of its cage. "I resent that," came from inside his mind, dripping with pretend hurt. "Why don't you like me? Do you want me to leave?" The corner of Naruto's mouth quirked upward a hair. Being away from his friends had really stolen a lot of the light that the formerly hyper and rambunctious blonde used to radiate. The fox seemed to have taken it upon himself to try and make him laugh, even if Naruto would become much more cheerful when he was surrounded by people. "You and I both know you can't do that," the blonde replied, turning his attention inward on himself. He found himself standing in a large room with pipes snaking all over the ceiling and a view of the outside world floating in the air in front of him. He looked to his right and saw the massive Kyuubi no Yoko watching him with one massive red eye. Red and blue chakras swirled around their feet, making a transparent haze that showed the ankle-deep water that rippled when it met the pair's bodies. "HMPH," the Ninetales snorted. "I could break out, now that I'm not locked in that cage like some pathetic puppy." "Yeah, and kill us both in the process," Naruto answered. He knew that the fox wouldn't try to escape due to their inner coils being as meshed together as they were. That was how the fox had gotten out in the first place. Their coils had merged, strengthening them both and rendering the Yondaime seal unnecessary because now Naruto was the seal. So now Kyuubi was able to walk through his body at his leisure and take control whenever he wanted, though the two had worked out an agreement that made them both happy. The agreement was that Kyuubi would lend Naruto his considerable chakra in return for being able to control Naruto occasionally. That had led to the duo watching their surroundings when the other was in control. That wasn't a foolproof solution to the ambush as it was only as effective as Naruto's senses and they couldn't stare out the back of Naruto's skull. No, they had to rely on the other senses, like smell and hearing, which were almost as good as Kiba's now. Naruto could still be ambushed, but it was very hard to do and, with his ally and stamina, could fight for a very long time. In an attempt to keep making themselves stronger and also to strengthen their bond, the pair had created a few jutsu that were very powerful and could only be pulled off by another Jinchuriki. Kyuubi had even shown him a few of the demon's jutsu. Turns out that demons had their own version of the ninja arts. A lot of it depended on the demon's own power and skill, but they did have them. The Tenma-fu had to be the most dangerous. They were demon seals that could do anything within the crafting demon's abilities. An example would be saying that Kyuubi was a master seal crafter and, with his stupendous power, could get the seals to do damn near anything. Shukaku, for a comparison, could have the same skill level as Kyuubi but, being weaker than the Ninetales, wouldn't be able to do nearly as much. Or the opposite could be true. A demon could have the same amount of power as Kyuubi, but not have the skill. It made Naruto's head hurt and he generally let the fox handle the seals, but the demon had insisted that Naruto learn 1 or 2 simple ones so his host could give himself an advantage in combat. No use in having that much power and having one of them unable to use it. Conversely, when Kyuubi was in control, he needed Naruto's chakra to make human jutsu work. He could use his own Yuki, but the more potent demon chakra tended to overstress their shared body. To Kyuubi's great delight, the two had discovered that human and demon chakra repelled each other. Their coils had merged, but their chakra had remained 2 very different, distinct entities. They had also discovered that while Kyuubi was normally in the back of Naruto's mind, he still had control over his chakra. The same held true when Naruto was in the passenger seat. In other words, even though one was dominant, the other could control their own chakra. A deadly effective jutsu they had developed was for Naruto to make his chakra hold itself very tightly against his skin while Kyuubi put his on top of the human chakra layer. The result was Naruto's complete access to all of Kyuubi's chakra, even though the more chakra Kyuubi supplied, the more he was in control. It all depended on whose chakra was dominant. When Naruto's chakra was dominant, Naruto was in charge. When the Yuki was dominant, Kyuubi was in command. They could switch back and forth willingly, and so that kept that unpredictability. You could be fighting Naruto one moment, then be torn apart by Kyuubi's vicious assault the next. The overall effect of these changes on Naruto and Kyuubi was almost incomprehensible. The foolish little boy of years past was gone, and in his place had come a very dangerous, powerful, and competent shinobi. So what do you want to do now? The demon asked now. The Uchiha brat is on the move. We saw that when we were at the hideout a couple of days ago. The primary reason Naruto had even chosen this piece of crap hut was because mountain country had a great location. It bordered both rice and fire countries, allowing him to intercept any Auto Nins deciding to make trouble for Konoha. The pair had paid a visit to the hidden lair that Orochimaru had used before his demise and Sasuke had been dumb enough to keep using, only to find it completely and utterly deserted and signs of massive troop movement in the countryside immediately around the stronghold. The trail had pointed straight at Fire Country. Naruto didn't need to be a genius or have the Kyuubi's input to know that his former friend was planning on invading Konoha. We will move as well. I've done all I can to try and bring Sasuke back. I realize now that some promises cannot be kept, Naruto answered. We'll kill Sasuke and I'll apologize to Sakura-chan. His demon tenant rolled his eyes at that. The brat still held feelings for the pink-haired vixen. He should move on to a worthier mate, like the Shukaku vessel's sister. Gross. Why would I want to get it on with a girl like her? Naruto asked, a look of true disgust on his face. Temari-san wasn't that bad, but if Naruto got into a relationship with her, then hurt her, Gaara would kill him, friendship or no. Admit it, brat, Kyuubi shot back, preparing himself for a rather enjoyable battle of wits with his host. She would be a much better mate than the pink hair. Yeah right, Naruto snorted, you're forgetting that Ba-chan taught Sakura-chan how to use that damn strength of hers. Kyuubi looked away. He had forgotten that little detail, but his pride would never allow him to acknowledge it. But the sand girl would be able to blow your precious Sakura-chan all the way to Wave Country before she could get close. The demon returned. Huh. Let's see his host get out of this one. Maybe the old Sakura-chan, the blonde host said with a small grin. But you've seen Sakura-chan fight since Ba-chan got through with her. And I'll bet the necklace that she's kept it up. Ah crap, the brat found a way out of it. Kyuubi had to admit that the boy had gotten sharper in the 5 years they had been training and fighting. Look, we've got to get going if we want to help Konoha stop Sasuke from wiping them out. Are you sure you're ready to face him? He did nearly kill you last time. If it hadn't been for the cult humans and myself, you wouldn't be here. All humor and banter was gone. It was time to be serious. I'm as ready as I can be, Kyuubi, the blonde missing nin replied. Kyuubi's massive eye looked down at him, genuine concern for him clear in the crimson orb. He may hate humans in general, but his time within the brat had taught the demon lord that not all humans were just ants to be stepped on. The fox had decided to defend Naruto's friends just as fiercely as the blonde himself. Though only the brat's friends. All the rest had better get the hell out of his way when he was in control, or suffer Kyuubi's displeasure. Naruto. You know you will have to kill the Uchiha brat, the fox reminded, purposely using Naruto's name. That was one of the ways Naruto knew his tenant was serious. Usually the pair called each other names like furball or brat. Yeah, I know. I swore I would do that a while ago. Or did you forget? Naruto's answer was sarcastic. Fool, I forget nothing. The fox demon roared, though his anger wasn't real. It was all part of the comedy routine that the two liked to engage in. After all, they were both fond of pranks and practical jokes. Naruto clapped his hands over his ears, stammering something about headaches and demons who should be more considerate of their host's sanity, before becoming aware of the world around him once again. He turned to the mound of belongings and shinobi gear sitting by the door. The blizzard had died out somewhat, allowing the Jinchuriki to clearly see the cliff edge on which his little haven sat. Naruto strapped on the gear and pulled a little something on to keep him warm as he bounded out of the hut. As the snow began to kick up, the former leaf shinobi bounced from lip to lip on the jagged cliff, his cloak rippling and snapping in the freezing wind. Tsunade was frustrated. How could she not be? She had a sound missing nin running around saving her shinobi, but refused to actually come Konoha to tell all that he knew. Jiraiya had left the village in order to go and try to find him and either, according to the Toad Hermit, bring him to Konoha or force him into the village, whichever was easier. Ibiki already had a room in Anbu headquarters with the man's name on it. Plus there was the paperwork. How the hell had Sarutobi-sensei managed to slog through this mess and retain his sanity? She was close to using a Kaden just on the huge mound of papers clogging her in tray. Just as the Hokage reached for another mission report, something shot through her open window in a blur of white fur and wind that sent her, for once neat, desk straight to messy hell again. What is going on? She bellowed at the massive white mound sitting in the middle of her office. Hokage-sama, are you alright? Her Anbu guards yelled, bursting through double doors so hard that they bounced off the walls. Tsunade, for her part, ignored the guards, focusing instead on the massive dog that's sitting in the middle of her office, wagging his tail, evidently very pleased with himself. Akamaru? The village leader asked skeptically. She knew to whom the dog belonged, but Kiba was away with Kurenai and Shino on a mission. The Inuzuka wouldn't have sent his best tool back unless he had a very serious reason. Then the Sannin noticed the tiny scroll that the horse-sized dog had in his mouth. The massive dog approached her and deposited the scroll at her feet. Stooping to retrieve it, she was amazed at how dry the thing was, considering the dog had had it in his mouth. She cracked the scroll's seal, feeling a little concerned. The little paper roll had a priority seal on it. It wasn't in wax, like protocol demanded, but Kurenai had drawn the kanji on the outside of the scroll. Inside was a short, curt message. Hokage-sama, Kiba, Akamaru, scented Otogakure army headed for village. On our way back, Uchiha Sasuke leading army. Please take defensive measures. Yuhi Kurenai, 15th Border Squad leader. The Hokage felt the blood drain from her face as she finished reading the short message. The Anbu weren't the elite of Konoha for nothing, and quickly noticed her pallor. Hokage-sama? One with a boar mask asked, his hesitance clear in his voice. The pair of special ops shinobi jumped when she suddenly began snapping orders. One of you go get the council together for an emergency meeting. The other, gather the Junins and Anbu command staff for a briefing. We have an invasion coming from the border. They'll be here in 3 days. As the two masked shinobi poofed out to perform their assigned tasks, Tsunade prepared herself for the first invasion to happen under her tenure as Hokage. She hoped she would make the right decisions and keep Konoha intact and its casualties to a minimum. Kami-sama knew that she had had a lot of loss in her life, and she didn't want anyone else to suffer as she had. As she left her office to brief the council and various members of Konoha's military arm, she paused briefly to tell Kotetsu to send a letter to Sanagakure and the Case Cage. They would need reinforcements, no matter how long it took to reach them. Now she had to prepare her village for war. Northeast of Fire Country, in the country that was almost entirely mountains, Jiraiya the Toad Hermit stopped dead in his tracks. He had been on the trail of the sound missing nin since hearing Kakashi's story about meeting the man. Yes, Jiraiya was certain that the missing nin was male. Maybe he was a little, but somehow the Toad user knew the mysterious shinobi to be a man. And that same questionable instinct had been screaming at him that he was close to another breakthrough. Either that or that sushi he'd had yesterday was acting up. Jiraiya shrugged and continued on his way, not even bothering to glance up. If he had, he would have seen a cloaked man standing upside down on the rock that jutted out over the pass the old man was currently strolling through. He wouldn't find out until later, but he'd just been closer to Naruto than anyone from Konohagakure had been for the last 5 years. Missed you chance, kid, came the voice of his literal inner demon. You could have told the toad pervert what the hell is going on. Naruto sighed at the fox's insistence that he talk to the man he regarded as his grandfather. Wow, I thought you were a smart demon. I'm a missing nin dumbass, he replied, still watching Ero Sennin walk away, completely unaware of his close proximity of his former student. Though it had been a near miss. If Kyuubi hadn't scented him as Naruto was running along the pass, the two would have butted heads in a very literal way. What does the missing nin stuff have to do with anything? The fox returned shortly. You know that the old man wouldn't give a damn. The demon lord just sighed when Naruto didn't respond, instead just dropping from the ledge he had been standing on, to continue the trek to Konoha. The fox, however, wouldn't be denied. He's heading away from that damn village. You really going to let one of the strongest shinobi in the place just walk away? Especially with the Uchiha bastard being as strong as he is? That froze Naruto cold. He hadn't thought of that. Kyuubi snorted. Nice to know the kid had kept at least a little of his stupidity. Made the fox demon look better. What do we do? He asked out loud. He felt a shift in the Yuki within him, Kyuubi's version of a shrug. Tell him, the fox suggested, plowing ahead before Naruto could protest. You don't have to show him your face. Naruto grinned with his shit-eating fox grin, something he hadn't done for almost 3 years, not since that time the duo had taken a day off to play pranks on a pompous minor lord in a small village in Northwind Country. Jiraiya hummed placidly as he walked along the narrow mountain pass on his way to the place where Kakashi had encountered the missing nin. To do that he had to cut through mountain country, and that was always a pain in the ass. Especially at his age. Old men were meant to take it easy, writing books. Not go tramping around half the continent looking for someone that. His mental rant was cut short by the sound of shifting around behind him. The white-haired Sannin whirled to confront the noise. There was no one behind him. The left and right were clear. So that left, above. Jiraiya's head snapped up and saw him. Crouching on the top of the pass wall above the old ninja, his cloak flaring across his body in the wind, was the sound missing nin. This is a most grave situation, Tsunade-sama, said one of the old council members. Tsunade hated dealing with the old farts. They were always, with the exception of 2 of Sarutobi-sensei's closer aides, trying to undermine her in attempt after attempt to further their own ends. Especially that bastard who commanded Root. We must come up with a plan to counter the attack, agreed another. I'm sure Uchiha-san is just misguided. Tsunade cut the old man off with a snort. Uchiha misguided? Yeah, right. He had accepted the curse seal without hesitation and had put his fist through Naruto's lung not too long after. Misguided her ass. The council, desperate to have one of their most potent Kekkei Genkai back in Konoha, had even decided to label him a C-class missing nin with a no hostilities order. Tsunade knew that the traitor wouldn't hesitate to kill the shinobi sent after him, so she had added a provision to the order that the Anbu could kill Sasuke if the situation warranted such a measure. By contrast, her adoptive little brother had been slapped with an S designation and was to be killed on sight. The Fire Shadow hadn't wanted that to happen, but even the Hokage was only allowed to force a missing nin declaration down 1 class, so she had labeled him a rank and put a no hostilities order on the declaration to boot. What we need to do, the Slug Princess cut in, her tone telling everyone to just shut up and let her speak, is set up a defensive line around Konoha. Then we evacuate all civilians, non-essential personnel and genin and academy students into the shelters. Tsunade-sama, Hyuga Hiyashi said with his usual holier-than-thou attitude. Are you sure that is the right course of action? The Hokage nodded, knowing that they would have to meet the assault right at Konoha's gates. A potentially fatal error, allowing the enemy to get that close to the village gates, but they had no choice because there was just no time. Sasuke had done a good job of keeping his army hidden. A day had passed since Akamaru delivered Kurenai's message, but none of the Anbu patrols had seen the Otto horde. Still, Tsunade knew that they were out there, and that was all she needed to know. Hiyashi returned the nod, confident that his clan would perform splendidly in the defense of their village. We don't have much choice, agreed Kakashi, nodding. The Junin had shocked everyone by showing up early for once. My eternal rival is correct. Maida Guy's voice blared at top volume as usual. We will show these riffraff what the fire of youth is all about. Yosh, Guy-sensei is correct. We cannot turn away, just because the fools want to meet Shinigami before their youth has run its course. Shouted the Junin's clone, Rock Lee. The young man was there because he was a special Junin, due to his inability to use chakra. Lee, Guy cried, tears flooding down his cheeks as he enveloped his apprentice in a hug. Guy-sensei. Lee, Guy-sensei. Lee, Guy-sen. Lee was cut off by an orange book entitled, Icha Icha Paradise. Smacked the exuberant special Junin in the back of the head. If we could get back on topic, Kakashi hinted pointedly as his hand returned to his pocket. Our time before Sasuke and Otogakure get here is running out, even now. The less time we spend on needless talking and, Here he glared at the council. Political posturing, the better. Everyone present nodded, and plans for the defense of Konohagakure continued to be made at a much speedier pace. Back in mountain country, Jiraiya and the sound missing nin hurtled side by side down the pass, both on their way to Konoha to help out in the impending assault. "Why did you go out of your way to find me?" Jiraiya asked, as the two began to descend the foothills and out onto the rolling slopes that led to the forests of Fire Country. Even now, the forest was visible in the distance as a wide dark blur that stretched for miles. The missing nin didn't even look at him as the pair hurtled toward the village. "My conscience wouldn't leave me the hell alone," he replied simply. The man had begun to talk more and more as the two shinobi got used to each other's presence. The sound trader winced as though something inside him hurt. "You okay?" the Sannin asked, noticing the younger man's twitch. The hooded ninja just nodded. He was trying to ignore the demon that kept telling him, "I told you so," over and over and over again. Naruto couldn't believe that he had decided to go with Kyuubi's harebrained scheme. "Who are you calling harebrained, Kit?" the fox grumbled. But the scam had worked. They had managed to get Ero Sennin to turn his old ass around and get moving back to Konoha. Now all the two shinobi had to do was get back to the village before Sasuke was able to overrun them. After that, who knew? Maybe if Naruto fought well enough, Ba-chan would let him be a Konoha nin again. "You honestly think that the big-chested woman will refuse to let you back into that damn village?" the Kyuubi snorted derisively. "Sometimes, his cage could worry about the stupidest things. She would probably keep you tied up to make sure you didn't leave again." Naruto felt oddly comforted by the giant demon's words. Yeah, maybe Granny Tsunade would keep him around. If not, well, maybe Gaara was hiring. Speaking of Gaara, the insomniac Cage had made it back to Suna and was pacing in his office, still trying to shake the feeling that something bad was going to happen. "Hey, Gaara?" Kankuro asked nervously. Gaara had sent more than one aide out the door on a tsunami of sand in recent weeks. Now no one approached the Cage office except for Tamari, Kankuro, and Baki. "Are you sure that something's going to happen?" He paled visibly at Gaara's annoyed, icy teal gaze. He had to look at his feet. How could he not? He'd spent most of his childhood fearing that look. "Don't you think that you're overreacting?" Tamari picked up quickly. "You won't eat and you quit sleeping again." Gaara had finally managed to get to sleep now that Shukaku was gone from his body, but when he got nervous, he reverted to old habits and turned into an insomniac again. Temari's question was answered for her when Baki hurtled through the door waving a scroll with the symbol for fire written on it. "Cage-sama," their former Junin instructor cried, clearly panicked. "Konohagakure is being invaded by the sound. The Hokage is requesting reinforcements." That set all the sand shinobi in the room on edge. Konoha was powerful. Not many people could work up the sheer balls it took to declare war on that village. That the sound would try again after being defeated last time was almost inconceivable. "What do we do, Cage-sama?" Baki questioned. Gaara stared out the windows that gave a panoramic view of the village hidden in the sand. Finally he responded. "It appears that Kankuro, Tamari and I will get that training journey after all," the former Jinchuriki stated softly. "Cage-sama," the three Junin in the room exclaimed together. "Surely you are not serious?" Baki cried, the half of his face not hidden by that annoying veil stricken with shock. "Only you three are going to go and reinforce the leaf. As powerful as all of you are, this is suicide." "I am technically still on leave," Gaara stated, his voice cold. "We will conduct our training. It matters not to me if it is against each other or on the auto weaklings. We leave in 2 hours." The Godime's voice left no room for argument. They would go. Sound nins would die, blown away, sliced into bits and crushed beneath a giant coffin of sand. Finally, Tamari and Kankuro smirked and nodded their agreement. Nothing like getting to spend a little quality time with each other and get to help out friends in the process. The invasion had begun, sort of. Right now it was more of a standoff. The Sound Army was arrayed all in one area outside the securely closed south gate. The very gate that had started this whole mess. The entire village's army was arrayed on the wall, shuriken, kunai and various jutsu at the ready. If the army made one step into their range, the defenders would cut loose and decimate the numbers of the besieging army. One shinobi, with a black flak vest, stepped into range, confident, totally sure that the forces of Konoha wouldn't cut him down where he stood. Sakura's eyes widened when she saw who the confident, or perhaps just plain stupid, Otto Nin was. She recognized him. Sasuke-kun, she whispered, her green eyes going wide. Next to her, Kakashi heard her whisper his former student's name and whipped up his Harai 8 to bear Obito's Sharingan to the air. Sure enough, it was Sasuke. This just went from bad to worse. By attacking Konoha, not even the foolhardy council would be able to ignore this. Sasuke had no chance of returning to the village now. Weaklings of Konohagakure no Sato. Sasuke yelled loud enough for all the people on the wall to hear. Where is the Hokage? I challenge her to a one-on-one duel to the death. A ripple passed through the crowd at the Otokage's words. Sakura, Kakashi said in a low voice. Sasuke was sure to have his Sharingan activated and his mask would hide his mouth. When he saw he had the other Junin's attention, he continued, go get Tsunade-sama. Tell her the situation and get her down here. But Kakashi-sensei, she started, but the older shinobi cut her off. No, get her down here. We don't have time. They outnumber us. Even if we bring the genin in they will overwhelm us, he said sternly. Another familiar voice spoke up now. Sakura-san, please do as Kakashi-san says. Sakura whirled to confront the man who had spoken, only to see Iruka-sensei. The scarred Chunin schoolteacher smiled then continued. Sakura, you need to go get Tsunade-sama. Before Sasuke's patience runs out. Sakura felt horrible. She was to get her master, so she could kill the boy she had a crush on? Tears began to well up in her emerald eyes. This wasn't fair. Well, Sasuke yelled, I'm waiting. Or is your great leader too scared to show her face? The Great Sound Horde laughed at their leader's remarks. You're too damn impatient. That's what happens when a spoiled whiny brat gets pumped up on power. The Konoha shinobi parted to reveal Tsunade herself, who promptly strode up the part and her men. With her was a pretty blonde with a fall of hair covering one eye. Ino, Sakura shrieked, but why? Because you wouldn't do anything forehead, came the other kunoichi's response, biting as ever. Are you telling me that you would risk Konoha's destruction because you wouldn't get your teacher? Her tone was accusing. Sakura, now Tsunade spoke, and she didn't sound happy. We will discuss your actions later. But for now, I have a pampered brat to put into his place. With that, she shed her green overcoat, tossed it to Ino and jumped over the edge of the wall to land in front of the Otto's leader. She straightened up and glared at the traitor. I will only tell you this once, Uchiha, the slug Sanin threatened. Turn your little army around and go home so I won't have to kill you all. Sasuke just smirked. Now why would I do that when I'm about to end your life? He asked, that dumb, cocky little smirk still plastered on his face. End my life? You think you can kill me, Uchiha Sasuke? The Hokage asked. The younger shinobi just smiled. Tsunade knew this was it. She would end the sound threat to Konoha forever right here and now. She only hoped that Sakura and Naruto could someday forgive her for what she was about to do now. She was going to kill Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke was confident. The bitch had shown herself. As he knew she would. Those who had friends were always so predictable. And weak. The power he had gained over the last few years from Orochimaru would be the key to beating this old hag and destroying Konoha forever. The opposing forces held their collective breath as the two powerful warriors began to circle. The opening blows were just moments away. Sakura felt like she was going to cry. Her crush and master were going to engage in life or death combat and there was not a damn thing she could do. Ino watched her friend as she came close to tears. The Chunin wanted to comfort her, but knew that Sakura had to see this. This was the only way to show Sakura that Sasuke was no longer coming back to Konoha. He was an enemy now. Yamanaka was glad that their Hokage had the good sense to realize that. Kakashi was watching everything with his implanted eye. The movements Sasuke made were foreign to him. He had quit using the techniques the copy nin had taught him, with the exception of Chidori. Hitaki just knew his traitorous student would never quit using that just you. For an instant he wished that he had never developed that assassination technique. Tsunade, for her part, was watching Sasuke's feet. It wouldn't do her good to get caught in a Sharingan-induced illusion. Similarly, the genjutsu she could use were useless. Uchiha's bloodline would shatter it in the blink of an eye. Guy had told her that the way to fight a Sharingan user was to watch their feet. Seeing as he'd fought Itachi that way, she figured it would work against Sasuke. His left foot shifted and the two sprinted at each other, their fists meeting in a thunderous crash. The combatants slid apart again and Tsunade knew she was in for one hell of a battle. Sasuke scowled in anger, his Sharingan blazing with fury. The damn bitch wouldn't look him in the eye. He figured he would just have to wear the hag out. She was old, no matter how you looked at it, close to 60 now. This would be over shortly. Then the leaf would burn. The two armies looked on with awe. The two battling shinobi weren't giving each other any ground. Neither had managed to land a single hit. Tsunade jumped into the air and unleashed a massive axe kick that put a crater right where the Uchiha had been an instant earlier. Fast, Tsunade observed, even as she dodged a tagged kunai, which detonated behind her. His attacks are sort of sloppy though. He's not used to fighting with taijutsu. With his Sharingan, though, it doesn't really matter. Her fist collided with the wall of Konoha. She'd had the Uchiha against the wall a moment earlier, the impact sending a giant fissure up the wall and causing some leaf nins up top to nearly fall over. But I will kill him. Maybe Tsunade's determination to kill Sasuke paid off because she caught his next attack, a kick, and threw him through the air. Sasuke's thoughts were jumbled as he tumbled helplessly end over end. How could this happen? He was faster, stronger, younger. How had she managed to catch and throw him? For all his perceived brilliance, Sasuke had overlooked one important fact. Experience. Tsunade just had more experience than the traitor. He could figure out one strategy or another, but chances were the Godem Hokage had already seen it a couple times. Uchiha managed to stop his ceaseless tumbling and righted himself. Reaching into his holsters, he pulled out 6 shuriken and some wire. The bitch wanted to play rough? Fine by him, he could play rough. The Godaim's eyes widened when the traitor threw shuriken at her. The stars passed her and wound around the tree behind her. The brat smirked and pulled on the near-invisible wires in his hands. Next moment, she was bound to the tree with a jaw-rattling crash. Sasuke landed away from her, a victorious smirk on his face. She couldn't escape, not without being cut to pieces by the wire. Sasuke made some seals and raised the wire to his lips. Kaden. Ryuka no Justu. The river of fire poured down the wire and slammed into the Hokage with full force. Sasuke had put so much chakra into the technique that the tree exploded instead of catching on fire. When the smoke and flame died out, there, burning on the ground, was Tsunade's corpse. A shocked silence fell across the witnesses to the clash of titans, then the sound burst out into unholy cheers and jeers. The Leaf, on the other hand, were shocked beyond words. Their great leader had been struck down by a lousy traitor. No. No, Sakura yelled. There was not a chance in hell that Sasuke could have beaten her master. No chance. Tsunade-sama, a comforting hand on her shoulder made her turn tear-streaked eyes on the hand's owner. Kakashi was watching her with an annoying calm look in his eyes. Sakura, he said softly, understanding her grief, but knowing there was nothing he could do to help. It's over. Sasuke won. No, you're wrong, she shouted. A mocking voice cut her off. What's the matter, Sakura? Sasuke jeered, can't stand the sight of your precious master beaten? Don't worry, you will all join her soon. He held up a kunai that glinted ominously in the bright sunlight. I'll butcher this village. The sound sent up a great cheer at his words and Sakura sank to the ground, holding herself and sobbing uncontrollably. This wasn't happening, she tried to convince herself, it couldn't be possible. Tsunade struck down by the man she loved? No, it couldn't be real. It just couldn't. Kabuto was stunned. The arrogant bastard had actually done it. He'd killed a Sannin. Kabuto's plans to take over Otogakure evaporated before his eyes. Uchiha's position in Oto would be forever cemented by this development. The masses would revolt if Kabuto killed the Oto leader now. He would be stuck serving a puffed-up pretty boy for the rest of his life. Doden. Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu. The earth right underneath Sasuke exploded and a fist shot out to nail the Leaf traitor right in the jaw, sending him flying into the ground in a massive explosion of dust, dirt, and rock. All the spectators to the match of the century watched in shocked awe as Tsunade wrenched herself free of the hole she had dug to escape the Sofushaisen no Tachi. Now it was the Leaf's turn to erupt into cheers as their Godem Hokage stood tall and brushed herself off. Sasuke stood as well, wiping blood from his throbbing jaw and chin as soon as he was on his feet. He glared at the old hag across from him. He had missed the switch. How? He demanded. The fifth smiled nastily. Kage Bunshin no jutsu, she replied with a smirk. Fun little jutsu, isn't it? Too bad I'm not as good as Naruto was with it. Now Sasuke was pissed off. The old hag thought she was something special? He'd show her what power really was. Purple chakra began to swirl around him as angry, glowing, flame-like marks began to crawl over his body. Tsunade's eyes widened as she recognized the first level of the cursed seal of heaven crawling across the man's body. This is bad, she thought. Knowing the full weight of the situation, if he uses the second level I'm done for. I can handle the first level, but he's gonna be a tough one. Fine, you want to quit playing around? The Godem challenged. Okay, we can do that. She made a cross-shaped seal, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 7 Tsunades appeared in a puff on ninja smoke where there had been one. Sasuke's eyes narrowed at the change in the battle. Even if the Bunshins only had half of the real Godaime's inhuman strength, they would still hurt him if the blows landed. Now his Sharingan wouldn't be able to tell which one was real either. Oh, well, just had to do it the old-fashioned way. His hands flew together making a familiar set of seals that had been taught to him by a shinobi from this very dump. Kakashi bowed his head when he saw the seals. So the traitor was going to finish the battle with the jutsu he didn't deserve to wield. He really wanted for someone, preferably the 2 students he had neglected, to hit him with Sen and Garashi for being so stupid. Sasuke felt the chakra buzz to life in his hands. He loved this jutsu. So many uses. The familiar chirping noise let him know the technique was ready. An instant later, and he was in his second level, the Chidori turning black. He blurred out of sight and struck down 6 Hokages before anyone, Tsunade included, had a chance to react. Now there was only one left. A quick roundhouse sent her flying and he was standing over her, Chidori begging to run her through. Tsunade had been shocked by the Uchiha's sudden speed. One moment he'd been there in his monstrous second form, then the next he'd destroyed all her shadow clones. Now he'd found the real her and had her right in the place where he could kill her. She was too old, too damn slow. Had Tsunade been just a couple of years younger, she could have avoided it. The world seemed to slow down as the Chidori dropped toward her vitals. This was it, no chance to escape. Tsunade the Slug Princess was going to die. For everyone, time stood still. A blur shot into her vision and kicked the Uchiha away. Tsunade had barely registered the black cloak before she found herself staring at the hood. A hood with a slashed sound Harai 8 played on it. What really shocked the hell out of Tsunade, though, were the sound missing Nin's first words to her. Are you okay, Ba-chan? Tsunade felt her heart stop. Did he just say, Ba-chan? She must have heard him wrong. The only person she let get away with that was Naruto, but he would never join the sound. He hated Orochimaru, even more than her or Jiraiya. But maybe, just maybe, this was really him. And Naruto? She asked, hardly wanting to believe the small shoot of hope that had sprung up in her chest. She nearly passed out when the hood nodded, the mouth stretching into a grin that wouldn't have looked out of place on a mischievous child. Or a fox, she thought wryly. Now the burning urge to see what her adoptive little brother looked like after 5 years seized her. Tsunade's hand left the ground next to her and moved slowly to the edge of the hood. All the shinobi on the wall had gone dead silent when Sasuke had knocked down the Hokage and moved in to deal the final blow. Add in the arrival of the sound missing Nin and you could have heard a pin drop. Kakashi, Sakura and Iruka watched as an exchange went on between Tsunade and the cloaked shinobi. They were out of earshot, and the shrouded ninja's body hid the duo's mouths so the 3 shinobi couldn't read the pair's lips at all. What they did see, however, was Tsunade's hand reaching for the man's hood. Jiraiya was up in a tree. He had no choice in the matter. The entire Otto army was between him and the other Sannin. How his mysterious companion had managed to get over there was beyond him, but he had, and now he was in the perfect position to act should the missing Nin or the Sound Army try anything funny. They would find Gamabunta sitting on their asses before the smoke from the summoning even cleared. Tsunade's breath hitched in her throat, and her hand shook violently as she slowly pushed back the cloak's hood. Time slowed for what must have been the millionth time that day as a nose was revealed, followed by 6 whisker-like scars, 3 on each cheek. Tsunade knew right then that this was her little brother, but she wanted to see his entire face, just to be sure it was really him and not some pretender under a henge. Naruto was doing all he could to let Ba-chan take this slowly and not rip his hood off himself. He knew that she wanted to make sure it was really him. Naruto also knew that if he did remove it himself, the shinobi, arrow Sennin among them, would kill him in an instant. Not a desired outcome for either of the two residents of Naruto's body. Tsunade felt the bottom drop out of her chest when the hood finally flopped back and revealed the face she had missed for the last 5 years. Tears welled in her hazel eyes as she looked at the face that was almost a carbon copy of the Yondaime Hokage's, yet was still the face of the pouting little boy with the sea urchin hair she had met 7 years ago in a bar in Tanzaku town. "Heya, Ba-chan," the boy, no, the man, said gently, seeing her speechless. He grinned at her again and stood up. Tsunade couldn't help but notice that the little shrimp of a boy had grown to over 6 feet tall. Oh, yes, the boy definitely took after his father. Arashi would have been proud of his son. Abruptly, the blonde's face darkened to a seriousness that reached even his normally laughing blue eyes, furthering the likeness the man bore to his father. "As great as this is, Ba-chan," he said conversationally, Tsunade hanging on his every word. "This is gonna have to wait. I've got some unfinished business with Sasuke bastard." With that, he turned and strode toward the rogue Uchiha, coming to a stop several feet away. He undid his cloak and flipped it off his shoulders. Under it he wore a simple outfit of an orange t-shirt and black pants with 3 kunai pouches, and on each leg was a shuriken holster. Sasuke scowled as his rival took out a perfectly preserved Konoha Harai 8 and tied it to his forehead. This battle would be tough to win. He might even need Manda, as much as the Uchiha didn't want to summon the stuck-up snake. But it all depended on the Dobi. If he let that damn fox out of its cage, or if he called on the giant toad Sasuke had seen him use once or twice, things would get very difficult indeed. Kyuubi felt alive. How could he not? Soon there would be a giant battle, the likes of which the world hadn't seen since that little bastard Arashi showed up to challenge his greatness. How ironic that he was stuck in that very man's son. Though Naruto had no idea. Kyuubi had a feeling that the big-chested woman and the old toad pervert wouldn't tell him until one of them was on their deathbeds. That was just how humans worked. Or maybe he was just biased. Either way, the fox wasn't going to be the one to break the news to Naruto. Tsunade, meanwhile, had heaved herself to her feet and shot up the wall to the top, to get a better look at the battle. Something told her she didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. Knowing her little brother, he had trained himself into the ground to get ready for this moment. Naruto rolled his neck to work out some of the knots in his muscles. He couldn't fight all tense like this. He had to be loose, limber, otherwise Sasuke bastard would tear him apart. "Ready, furball?" he asked, knowing full well the fox lived for a battle like this. It was a great comfort in heated combat to know that someone had his back. Even if that someone happened to be an insanely powerful demon lord. "Ready, brat," his constant companion replied. "Try and let me get a piece of him. I really want to show this little prick what true terror is all about." Naruto grinned and prepared to do battle with his one-time best friend. A chill wind whipped in from out of nowhere. All those up on the wall could see the ominous gray clouds gathering in the distance. It was as if the gods themselves were coming to witness this clash. Each combatant drew a kunai and waited. "I'm gonna need to be fast. Sasuke bastard hasn't been slacking off for the last year." Naruto's blue eyes, holding all the warmth of a sapphire in the Arctic, narrowed, "but neither have I. Dobi will die here," Sasuke thought to himself gleefully, "and I will gain the one thing left that I need to kill Itachi." The Mangenkyu Sharingan. The bystanders felt like cotton had been pressed over their mouths and stuffed into their lungs. In their eagerness to fight, both Naruto and Sasuke had been letting their chakra levels rise. Now it was only a matter of time before the tension between the two snapped and the battle got underway. The tension snapped. Naruto sprinted at Sasuke as fast as he could, flipping his kunai into a reverse grip. The knife flashed out and lanced towards Sasuke's carotid artery. The Uchiha's own kunai flashed out at the same time and the weapons met in a shower of sparks and ringing steel. Sasuke stabbed at the Jinchuriki, who threw himself backward, planting his hands on the ground and kicked both feet straight up. Sasuke saw stars as Naruto's sandals met his jaw with such force that it lifted him off the ground. The blonde had followed through with the kick, using the momentum to flip himself up to his feet. Now he spun, sticking out his leg and letting it collide with Sasuke's ribcage in a thunderous blow that sent the Uchiha straight into the village wall. Several people fell over from the concussion of the collision between Sasuke's body and the wall. Sasuke charged out of the wall with a war cry, speeding straight at Naruto. His arm flashed and the kunai he had somehow managed to keep a grip on sped from it like a bullet, heading straight for Naruto's face. Crap, Naruto yelled at himself. He'd expected Sasuke to be down longer than that. He was still off balance from the kick he'd sent to the traitor's ribs. No time to think. ACT. Now, his hands did the acting for him as his brain was still processing. They made a cross-shaped hand seal and Naruto called on his trademark jutsu. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The clone appeared and, to everyone's very great surprise, caught the kunai inches from the real thing's face. The clone gave Naruto's trademark grin. Surprised? The clone asked, seeing Sasuke's bewildered face. I've been practicing. What did you think I was doing the last 5 years? With that, he handed the real Naruto Sasuke's kunai and disappeared in a puff of ninja smoke. Now Naruto gave the fox grin at his enemy's face. Sasuke recovered from the brilliant ninjutsu show and smirked. Figures. You only know 3 jutsu and need help for 2 of them. You are, and always will be, the dead last. Naruto dipped his head and Sasuke thought he'd crushed the annoyance's will to fight. It was over now. Naruto would die. He made the hand seals for Chidori. He would end this now. His Sharingan activated and the Uchiha sprinted at Uzumaki with all the speed he had. Chidori! Look out, Naruto! Iruka, Tsunade and Sakura screamed together. The man gave no sign that he'd heard them. He made no move as Sasuke closed on him faster than almost everyone below Junin could follow. Sasuke's eyes widened when Naruto's head snapped up, the fire that he was so used to seeing in his rival's eyes burning even more fiercely than ever before. In that same instant, Naruto's right arm snapped up and the Chidori was halted in a splash of colliding chakras. Rasengan! Naruto shouted, right before the 2 opposing jutsu reacted and the resulting explosion hurled the 2 apart. Sasuke landed like a cat, skidding backward trying to stop his momentum. Naruto rolled once to bleed off speed, before launching himself out of the roll and back onto his feet. Sasuke wanted to scream in frustration. This was not going the way the Uchiha prodigy wanted. He was Uchiha Sasuke. The Dobi should be lying dead at his feet right now. Now Naruto would learn what real power was all about. Manda would feast today. The raven-haired traitor bit his left thumb and smeared the blood on his right palm. Naruto's eyes widened when he saw what his former friend was doing. He was going to use the summoning technique. Well, 2 could play at this game. He mimicked the Uchiha's movements and the 2 formed the same set of seals and slammed their blood-streaked palms into the dirt. Kachiyose no Jutsu. The pair cried together. There was a massive explosion of smoke and wind that made all present shield their eyes from all the tiny pebbles that had been kicked up by hurricane-force winds. Jiraiya, forced to abandon his tree when 2 massive bodies knocked it over, appeared next to Tsunade. Tsunadeheim! He yelled, what the hell is going on? Tsunade punched him in the face. He keeled over, eyes swirling with blood pouring out of his broken nose. Watch you idiot, the 5th replied grumpily. Really, the nerve of that pervert. Popping out of thin air when she was trying to make sure Naruto was okay and then yelling in her ear. He deserved what he got. The smoke that hung over the battlefield was beginning to clear. Screams of pain accompanied the appearance of a giant purple snake and equally enormous toad that was dressed like a Yakuza gangster. It appeared that the snake's long serpentine body was crushing many of the sound forces. Naruto watched the injured men writhe in agony from the multi-ton reptile and shook his head in disgust and sadness. He had known from his time within sound that Sasuke had gotten just as sadistic as Orochimaru, but he had chosen not to believe it. That is, until Kyuubi threw what he didn't want to see in his face and he became the sound's one and only missing nin. Manda! The giant toad on whose head Naruto was currently standing spoke, clearly puzzled by his summoning into the material plane. Right in front of his hated enemy. The head swiveled to look over the wall. Konoha? What the hell's going on around here? The boss toad took a big draft on his pipe. He exhaled a giant cloud of smoke, carelessly forgetting where he was and accidentally blew it over the Konoha nin's arrayed on the wall. That made Jiraiya jump to his feet, coughing and hacking. When he saw who had woken him up, he decided to take his anger out on the source. "Hey, you damned tadpole, watch where you're breathing that shit. I wanna live to see 70 you know," he bellowed, conveniently ignoring the fact that he smoked as well. All the Leaf Shinobi present groaned. Kakashi sighed and rubbed his implanted eye. Now would start the comedy routine between the self-proclaimed Toad Hermit and the boss Toad. "Jiraiya, there you are, you buffoon. Why did you get knocked off when you summoned me?" Must be old age setting in," Gamabunta yelled. That made more than one vein on the Toad Sanin's head bulge out, but before he could make a snappy comeback, another angry voice entered the argument. "Hey, will you two ladies knock it off already? I'm trying to fight here," Naruto shouted at both Summon and Sensei. He bounded over to Gamabunta's eye ridge and leaned over it, right into the Toad's vision. The yellow eyeball widened in shock. The massive Toad almost said the Yondaime's name, but then he noticed the Shodai's necklace. "Naruto? It can't be. Naruto is short little Gaki," that set the blonde off. "What the hell do you mean, short little Gaki?" he yelled. "I'm 20 freaking years old here." The Toad's wide mouth curled up into a smile. "I don't believe it," Gamabunta thought to himself. "I don't see the kid for the longest time, and when he summons me again, he's a clone of Arashi. Got it right on the first try too, 'cause I don't see Gamakichi anywhere." Any further conversation was cut off by a low hissing voice. "Are you three morsels done with your comedy routines SSSS?" It was Manda. Just prior to this, that arrogant whelp Sasaki, or whatever the hell his name was, were arguing over the human sacrifices the boy owed him. After coming to the agreement that the snake boss could eat the entire village, the snake had butted into their conversation. "Manda, shut the hell up. You need my help with this worm, Gaki?" Gamabunta asked his summoner. Naruto sighed at the continued use of Gaki, but replied anyway. "Yeah, mind helping me out, Boss Toad?" the blonde asked. For once, the lazy Toad decided to not be and help the kid out. "Sure, I hate snakes," the gangster Toad replied, pulling out his sword. He would slice and dice that purple abomination of nature and make himself snake kebabs for dinner. For the second time during that battle, chakra and tension levels began to skyrocket right up through the roof, and all the weaker shinobi in the area felt like they had cotton pressed over their mouth and nose. The four warriors stared each other down. Then the snake lunged forward so fast that Gamabunta barely had enough time to react. Naruto found himself pressed to the amphibian's forehead as he flew 3,000 feet into the air. Then he was floating as the Toad began his descent. "I'm gonna be sick. I'm not used to this," he thought as he felt his stomach float into his throat. In the back of his mind, he heard Kyuubi laughing at him. "Shut up, furball." The fox just snickered harder. "Why, this is just too damn funny," his tenant replied. Gamabunta slammed to earth with the force of a large bomb, kicking up a massive dirt cloud in the process. When it cleared, the Toad boss's sword was jammed deep into the earth, with no sign of a giant snake summon impaled on the other end. "Where'd he go?" Naruto asked. Then the ground started to rumble. "You just had to ask. Didn't I just tell you to shut up?" Gamabunta jumped again, just clearing the snapping jaws of Manda as he lunged from his underground hiding place. The Toad had jumped forward this time, launching himself at the sword still impaled in the ground. "Stop him, you damn worm!" Sasuke shouted. If the giant frog got his hands on the sword, it was all over. He'd seen the frog use the sword to rip the arm off of a giant raccoon made of sand before. "Shut up, you insignificant human!" The summon bellowed at him. "I already know." They lost precious time arguing and Gamabunta made it to his sword. Naruto fell over as the chief Toad was rammed by the purple snake, who had been hot on their heels. Gamabunta managed to stay upright even if Naruto hadn't and somehow swing his redwood-sized sword. A deep gash appeared in the snake's body and he reared back, hissing and spitting in agony as the wound sprayed blood everywhere. Naruto suddenly had an idea. "Hey, boss," he yelled, grinning at the plan that had formed in his head and had Kyuubi howling with glee. "Cover him with oil." "Why? Just do it." The Toad responded and his cheeks bulged outward as he brought up oil from deep inside his body. Jiraiya began to chuckle when he saw what the Toad was doing. "Jiraiya-sama?" Sakura asked. confused as to why the old man was laughing. "Are you okay?" Tsunade was smiling as well. She had seen this jutsu a number of times before and knew Sasuke had better get out of there now or get one hell of a hot foot. "I'm fine," the Toad Hermit answered. "Just watch. Naruto's about to turn up the heat." Sasuke was busy hanging on to the top of Manda's thrashing head and was so saved from being drenched by the oil that Gamabunta spit out a second later. "Awesome," Naruto shouted. This would turn out better than he had hoped. "Hey Gaki," the Toad Summon said, clearly annoyed that he'd wasted so much oil. "You're supposed to light it on fire." "Oh, well, if you insist," Naruto replied, clearly feigning innocence on how the jutsu was supposed to work. He reached into the pouches on the back of his belt and drew out a single explosive tag. His wrist flicked and sent the paper bomb on its way, latching right on Manda's underbelly. He made a hand seal. "Katsu!" he bellowed. The tag exploded and engulfed his foe in flames as the oil caught fire. Inside him, Kyuubi sighed. "Why, oh why, did you have to imitate that clay using freak?" "Because I wanted to." The fox just sighed at his cage's immaturity. Of course Kyuubi couldn't really blame the blonde. This was the first time he'd seen his friends in 5 years. Of course he'd be a little wound up. Manda managed to endure the fire until the oil was all used up. "That was as a low blow," he hissed indignantly. Naruto smacked himself on his head. "Well duh, I'm a shinobi, dumbass. Low blows are what we do," he bellowed. The only response he got was the snake lunging forward to try and kill him. "Hold on, Gaki," the Toad Lord yelled as he jumped up and away from his attacker. As they hit the apex of their jump, Naruto had a sudden flashback to the Chunin exams from when he'd been 12. He grinned as he got another insane idea. Kyuubi saw what his host was planning. "Oh dear God, you seriously want to do that again?" Naruto stuck his tongue out at the kitsune, grinning. "Relax, it'll all work out, and after we get the creepy-ass snake to go away, I'll let you out." "Well then, by all means go with your little plan." If it mean he got a chance to play with the Uchiha bastard, the Kyuubi wasn't about to complain. Naruto channeled chakra into his feet and jumped as high as he could. Everyone gasped at the man's seeming stupidity. He would be crushed beneath the snake's body or eaten if he left Gamabunta's back. "Naruto, you idiot!" Sakura, Tsunade, Iruka and Jiraiya all shouted at the same time. Kakashi just shook his head at Naruto's antics. Maybe he hadn't changed in all the time he'd been gone. Then again, the copy nin remembered, Naruto had always been unpredictable and he at least seemed to be thinking things through more than he used to. Maybe, instead of shaking his head, Kakashi should be making some popcorn to go along with this little show. Things were about to get interesting. Sasuke also noticed Naruto's leap and wasted no time in pointing it out to his snake summon. Manda let out a hissing laugh and tilted his head back, opening his cavernous mouth. Naruto grinned as he saw the snake playing right into his hands. He didn't have the time or the patience to let Gamabunta have all the fun. He curled up into a ball and hoped Manda didn't like to chew. Has he lost it? Temari shrieked to the other two Suna shinobi. They had arrived just in time to see a man that could only be Uzumaki Naruto leap off the descending toad's head and arc directly for the huge snake's mouth. Knowing him, probably, Kankuro replied, astounded that any one man could be able to leap into the waiting jaws of a snake the size of Shukaku. Gaara just shook his head as he continued to watch the spot in the sky that was Naruto get swallowed by the purple monstrosity. He never did think about things, Gaara said to no one. He was just thinking out loud. He could remember the last time he'd seen that giant toad. And who would ever forget the gargantuan battle he'd had with Shukaku? Of course, Gaara had been asleep for most of it so he didn't know that much, but Temari had been there and she'd filled him in on what had happened. You got that right, Kankuro said nodding. Naruto was mashed, compressed and squeezed as he felt the massive snake's muscles working him deeper into Manda's body. He had to wait until he had stopped moving. In the rank and pitch-black silence he finally felt himself stop moving. He grinned despite his predicament. This bastard had made a big mistake in swallowing him. When you're done congratulating yourself, the Kyuubi butted in, impatient to get his turn in battle. Would you please get on with it? Okay, sheesh, Naruto grumbled. Geez, some people couldn't wait 5 minutes. Everyone outside fell silent with varying degrees of disgust on their face, either at Naruto's stunt or at the bulge in the snake's body working its way down to Manda's middle. "Ah, tasty," Manda hissed, clearly relishing his snack. "Now, what other morsels can I find around this SSSS dump?" Screams erupted as the snake lunged for the forces arrayed on the top of the wall. As Shinobi let loose with various weapons and jutsu, Naruto was busy building chakra for the last, and most entertaining, part of his plan. His eyes snapped open as he finally hit the level of chakra he thought he would need. He made a cross seal with his hands and called his trademark jutsu one more time, except on a much larger scale. "Taiju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he yelled. Outside, Manda suddenly stopped, inches away from devouring a terrified Chunin by the name of Keitaro. Something felt funny. Gamabunta, sneaking up behind the snake to ambush him, suddenly stopped when he saw the bulge where Naruto was suddenly double, then triple in size. What is he doing? Iruka wondered as he watched amazed. Sakura was stunned too. Then she remembered the story Naruto had told her in the Forest of Death during her first Chunin exam. About how he had been swallowed by a giant snake and had gotten out by using the shadow clone technique to blow it up from the inside out. "He's going to expand Manda until he blows up," she shouted, the excitement clear in her voice, drawing the attention of everyone in earshot to the bulge that was continuing to expand. "Way to go, Naruto. UGNH, groaned the snake. He felt like he was about to hurl, "I ate too much." That was the last words out of the summon before he exploded, spraying blood and gore all over the place. The wall was drenched, as were a few houses on the other side of the wall. The south wall bordered the residential district. Sakura knew that there would be some pissed-off homeowners when the invasion ended. Not if, when. If Naruto could take down a summon as spectacularly as he'd just done, then he could certainly stop an invasion. Now, instead of a massive snake, there were what must have been close to 3,000 Narutos. In a massive explosion of smoke, all the clones dispersed as one, as did Gamabunta, who was laughing his massive ass off at what his henchmen had done. Now both Sasuke and an exhausted Naruto were standing on top of the wall. Sasuke was furious about what his annoying former teammate had done, but there was no way around it. Naruto had bested him. This round anyway. Sasuke was in a tight spot, but Naruto was worse off. The man seemed to be teetering on the edge of passing out. Sasuke smirked, his confidence returning once more. Naruto never did have great chakra control. "Way to go, Dobi," he taunted, sure that Naruto was on the ropes and would be easy prey. He could almost feel the power of the Mangenkyo Sharingan being released. "You've used up all of your chakra. Now you're nothing, a liability. Just like you've always been." He got no response out of the other man, who was heaving great breaths because of both exhaustion and oxygen deprivation inside Manda. "Good God, Naruto, I thought that you would have learned your lesson over the last year." "Guess not." It was fortunate that Sasuke's attention was on belittling Naruto and not looking at him, opting to stare out over the village he was about to obliterate. Tsunade and Naruto's friends were watching him, however. And what they saw scared the crap out of them. The blonde's hand was steaming, and his fingers were twitching, the nails on them slowly lengthening into claws. The places where Manda's stomach acid had eaten through his clothes and burned Naruto's skin began to steam and heal. Steam also began to leak out from underneath his feet, slowly bleeding into bright crimson chakra. Demon chakra. Kakashi? The masked ninja looked over at the Toad Sannin who had spoken to him. "You still have that seal I gave you?" He was referring to the small square of parchment with a complex seal inked out on it, designed to suppress the Kyuubi's chakra. "Yeah, I held onto it just in case," he replied. "You think we'll need it?" Jiraiya sincerely hoped that that was sarcasm in the masked shinobi's voice. Otherwise the Toad Sannin would have to kill him. A Kyuubi-possessed Naruto was not someone he wanted to deal with right now. No one did. Not only would Naruto be freakishly powerful, but he would be vicious and they might have to kill him, and Jiraiya didn't want to do that. Not after the kid had just gotten back. "Seriously, dead last, why do you even continue as a shinobi?" Sasuke was still trying to insult Naruto. The Uchiha didn't realize that he wasn't dealing with the Jinchuriki anymore, but the beast that he held in check by simply existing. Kabuto was no fool. He knew what was about to happen. This was it. Now was the time to strike and kill Sasuke. The best part was, the Kyuubi would do it for him and he would be able to take command of the sound without ever having to challenge Sasuke. "Captain," he said softly to the man next to him. "Yes sir? We're pulling out. Tell all the men to return to Rice," Kabuto said smoothly. The commander looked shocked. "But Kabuto-sama, Sasuke-sama is a dead man," the bespectacled man interrupted, cutting off any further protest. "Take a look at the traitor up there. Notice anything about him?" The Auto Nin looked at the man who had decided to betray them after being welcomed in with no real protests. Orochimaru-sama had been very pleased to have a Jinchuriki. He would have been able to strike a deal with the Akatsuki, especially with the host who held the Kyuubi, strongest of the Biju. "His body is steaming? Very good. It's a sign that the Kyuubi within the brat is rising to the surface. Very soon now, Sasuke-sama will be nothing more than a bloodstain on that wall. So we will cut our losses and run? Konohagakure will be left standing." He trailed off at the murderous look Kabuto sent his way. The man realized that Kabuto-sama was right. There was no way for them to help Sasuke-sama. The Kyuubi would slaughter them all with just a flick of his tails. He leaned to his adjutant and passed the order to withdraw. Through whispers and covert hand signals, the Otogakure horde began to slowly withdraw, leaving some 150 dead, all due to the clash between the summoned creatures. "Now, I will kill you, gain the Mangenkyu Sharingan and kill my brother." At last Sasuke had reached the end of his speech. Naruto was sitting cross-legged on the soggy ground in his mental room, wishing he had popcorn. He'd been watching Kyuubi all during the speech and had seen the fox's tails beginning to twitch, a sure sign that the demon was getting impatient and was preparing himself to strike. "This is gonna be good," Naruto thought gleefully to himself. Kyuubi felt his cage's anticipation and knew that the time was at hand. He would deal the finishing blow. Naruto had allowed him that much. The Nine Tails knew how much bringing Sasuke back meant, but also knew that Naruto really wanted to kill the Uchiha himself. That he would hand that goal over to Kyuubi with no complaining said a lot about how much the pair had come to rely on and trust each other in recent months. "Are you done now?" the demon said with Naruto's mouth. Everyone took one look at each other and headed for the nearest rooftops they could find. Naruto's voice had gone from his normal pitch to a deep and very bass tone. Everyone who knew about what was inside the man knew that the Kyuubi had taken over. Uchiha Sasuke now faced the single greatest menace to ever threaten the Leaf Village. What was that dead last? Sasuke snarled. He would dare to interrupt after Sasuke had allowed him a few more minutes to live? "I said, are you done?" the fox repeated. Naruto started to laugh outright. There were two things Kyuubi hated more than anything, the Yondaime and repeating himself. Making the fox do that was one thing that was sure to piss him off. Which is why Naruto made him do it often. "A stupid fool should remember to never interrupt his superiors," Sasuke said coldly. He still thought that he was dealing with Uzumaki Naruto, not a demon. He turned to glare at the dead last and found him just standing there, glaring at him with one angry red eye with a slit for a pupil. Sasuke took a few involuntary steps back despite himself. He smirked. "So, the baka can't even finish what he started without help. How pathetic. You say that like you believe that I possessed Naruto," the fox hissed. The urge to rip Sasuke's body in half and dance on the pieces clear in the demon's voice. "Yet you continue to be wrong. Naruto let me have control over his body." Kakashi's eyes widened when his Sharingan picked up Naruto's lip movements. The blonde had given control over to the Kyuubi? What lie had the fox spun to get him to do that? The sound was far enough away. They could turn their backs to the enemy and not worry about being decimated. Unfortunately for them, what they found when they did turn around made them wish that they had stayed to be slaughtered by the Kyuubi. Now the Auto Nins faced a giant tsunami, composed entirely of sand. They had only a split second before it crashed over them. Those who managed to stay near the top heard only a pair words before their deaths. Sabaku Taiso. None had time to scream in pain, they were crushed so fast, Kabuto among them. The Sly Nin had been the first one hit with the sand avalanche. He'd also been one of the deepest ones to be buried. Gaara stood, having completed his jutsu and brushed himself off. "Damn," Kankuro whined, "you didn't even leave us any." "Does it matter, Kankuro?" Tamari snapped, rolling her eyes. "We can always spar with some of the Konoha shinobi." Gaara gave a half smile as his brother and sister began to bicker with each other. Really, you'd never guess that they were in their 20s by the way that they acted sometimes. The case cage turned back to Konoha to watch the battle unfolding on the wall. He hoped that his friend, Uzumaki Naruto, was okay, if that red chakra swirling around him was anything to go by. Let's keep going. Uzumaki Naruto still faces Uchiha Sasuke. He may need help. Gaara's words cut the sibling rivalry short and the trio began to walk across the bloody sand that still covered the ground. Sasuke gulped as red chakra blasted up around the Kyuubi, beginning to shape itself into a rough outline of a fox. This wasn't good. Naruto may be a pathetic excuse for a shinobi, but the Kyuubi was death in physical form. The last few times the duo had fought, Naruto had been the one in control. Now the fox had full control over Naruto's body and if the demon was to be believed, the Dobi had let him do it. One could take that to also mean that Naruto wouldn't be stepping in to save Sasuke from being shredded to ribbons by the vicious demon. I'm in deep shit, crossed Sasuke's mind before he activated the first level of his curse seal, the black comma-shaped design burning as it wove its way over his skin, drawing out all of his chakra. The Kyuubi grinned. Unlike Naruto's grin that was full of laughter and warmth, this one promised nothing but pain, torture and death. Sasuke had seen this grin once before, the day Orochimaru died. The Uchiha had been in the room watching the two powerhouses grapple and struggle. Then that grin had come out and Orochimaru had frozen, a look of stark terror on his face. In the instant he'd frozen, Naruto, not Kyuubi, had swung his kunai and Orochimaru's head had been sliced clean off in a move that would have made an Enbu proud. Isakumi, was all the possessed man said. Before Sasuke knew what hit him, he was shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. He began to sweat, and it didn't take long before he soaked in the moisture. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the curse seal was withdrawing. He had to run, had to. There was no way in a million years he'd be able to stand up to this monstrosity. He would be butchered like a rabbit before the hawk. The world was spinning, his vision graying out. His breath came in short, rapid breaths. All the while, Kyuubi's eyes just watched him. And the red orbs seemed to grow, until Sasuke felt as if he was under a microscope. He couldn't do anything to hide. He was just a lamb for the slaughter. He was about to die. He suddenly realized that he was laying on the ground. He couldn't stand against Kyuubi. He had to escape. He didn't want to fight anymore. Then the stark terror he'd felt when the Kyuubi had said just that single word faded enough to where Sasuke could think straight. He had to get away. Konoha's destruction wasn't enough of a reward to tangle with a demon that could reduce him to a blubbering baby with just a single glance. He crawled to the edge of the wall and looked over it. It was a long way down. He felt like his stomach was going to come out of his mouth. He couldn't take it. Sasuke gritted his teeth and heaved himself over the edge. A second later, he'd smashed into the ground in an impact that made him cry out. He couldn't feel his legs, so walking was out. He began to crawl, trying to put some distance between him and the demon that had crushed his will to fight. No longer did Sasuke want to burn the leaf. Up on the wall, Kyuubi smiled nastily when the Uchiha had crawled out of sight and gave control over to Naruto, who was hopping mad at him for letting Sasuke get away. What in the hell is wrong with you? Naruto shrieked, his voice hitting pitches that shouldn't have been possible for a man past puberty. You could have ended it right there. But no, you just had to let him get away. Baka furball. Listen Naruto, Kyuubi purred, satisfied with Sasuke's reaction to the Isakumi. Now the stage was set for their next battle. The one that would hopefully end with the spoiled Uchiha's demise. Yes, I could have killed him. Why didn't I? Because, I wanted him to know that we can render him helpless with but a single glance. Now the next time we do battle, he will be so twitchy he will make stupid mistakes. And make killing him that much easier. Naruto shut up right then, his old squinty-eyed expression on his face. Finally he nodded after an eternity of thought. Yeah, you're right, he sighed, damn it, I hate it when you're right. The fox just laughed at his cage before punting him into the real world. Every shinobi of the leaf watched in stunned awe as the Uchiha toppled out of sight. Then, after nearly 20 minutes of just standing there, Naruto finally faced them, his eyes and face exactly as they should have been. Next thing the blonde knew, Tsunade, Iruka, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Sakura, who had seen every minute of the unbelievable battle between him and Sasuke, mobbed him. Tsunade was the first to reach him, and wasted no time in clobbering him on top of his head the moment she reached him. Yow! Damn it, Ba-chan! Naruto shouted as he picked himself up from the small crater he'd made from the force of her blow. What the hell was that for? For leaving me for 5 years and not even saying goodbye, dumbass. The Godem Hokage yelled right back, the fighting duo's faces just inches apart. And for letting that stupid demon have control of you. I can't help it, Naruto protested, looking very much like he was 12 again, squint eye pout and everything. It's part of our damn deal. Dead silence met his words. Thankfully, all of the normal Konoha shinobi and all of Naruto's other friends had returned to their normal duties. All of Naruto's friends thought that they would be able to see him later, provided the missing nin was graded his status again and allowed to stay in the village. Deal? Kakashi echoed, wondering if he should loosen his mask. The thing must be depriving him of air and now he was hallucinating. Now Naruto's shift in personality took everyone by surprise as he went from hyper to serious faster than it took to blink. Yeah, our deal, he said. Tsunade smiled gently. This was something she had to know, both as Hokage and to have something to blackmail the blonde with later on if it was embarrassing enough. Well, the fifth said finally. It appears that we have much to talk about. But how, Ba-chan? Naruto asked. I'm a missing nin and the council will commit suicide before they agree to reinstate me. Tsunade's face darkened. They'll let you back in or they'll have to deal with me, she growled ominously. Now a new voice spoke up from behind them. And they will also know that they will have to deal with Sanagakure if you are not made into a Konoha nin again, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto turned so fast that he almost pulled a muscle in his neck. He grinned excitedly when he saw who it was. Gaara. The case-cage smiled softly, only the second one that Naruto had ever seen out of the normally emotionless man. He noticed the other two and grinned at them too. Temari and Kankuro returned his smile and the group began to walk toward the Hokage's tower. Naruto forgot all about the council and the vote they would have to take to reinstate him. It didn't matter. He was back. No, I absolutely refused to allow that thing to serve as a Konoha shinobi. Despite coming from Danzo, the commander of Root, that was the prevailing sentiment of the council. But you cannot deny that without Naruto's help, Konoha wouldn't be standing and I would be dead. Tsunade protested. She knew that she would have her hands full in dealing with the prejudiced fools. But their hatred for Kyuubi was even more deep-seated than she could have ever imagined. Do you honestly think that we couldn't have turned the tide? Anbu would have done the job. No, that simple word shut everyone on the council up. Tsunade hadn't spoken, Gaara had. Uzumaki Naruto saved this village, as did Otogakure is functionally gone. There were some survivors, but it is unlikely that they will be able to regroup, and Uzumaki Naruto has driven Uchiha Sasuke into hiding by allowing Kyuubi to break him with a single glance. Gaara fixed each and every council member with his infamous glare. He held their gaze until each one looked away. If you will let such a powerful shinobi, who is known for his fierce loyalty to your village, walk away, then I will allow him into Suna. That is an empty threat, Case-Cage-sama, said the councilman with the green glasses. You cannot allow him sanctuary because of our alliance. That was partially true. However, there was one loophole, one that Gaara was about to exploit to its full advantage. That is only in the case of missing nins who have shown open hostility to Konohagakure. Uzumaki Naruto has done no such thing, nor would he ever. Therefore, I am within our treaty to allow him to become a Suna nin should he choose it. A murmur swept the chamber that village leaders sat in along with the two cages in their formal dress, complete with sweeping hats. Tsunade shot Gaara a quick look of gratitude, which earned her a small nod from the stoic cage. It appeared that having Naruto in Suna was just as terrifying to them as him being in Konoha. How do you know that the demon hasn't shown any hostility to the village? Danzo asked, the hatred of Naruto clear in his voice. He has been an Oto nin. How do we not know that he hasn't killed our shinobi? Tsunade had the answer for that one. Naruto has told me that he was well known within Oto for wearing his cloak at all times. Only Orochimaru, Kabuto, and Sasuke knew of his real identity. There are no records from any of our shinobi saying that they have come under attack by anyone from Oto coming even close to matching that description. The council shifted nervously in their seats. Two of their key arguments against arresting and executing Naruto were gone. Once more, Danzo, who had been named the council speaker for this hearing, spoke one more time. Can you disprove what the demon did 20 years ago? Gaara's voice, when he answered, was low and had bad things promised for the council. If he killed all these bigoted fools, he had a feeling that Tsunade-sama wouldn't care. The terrifying image he was projecting wasn't made any happier by sand that was starting to swirl up around his body. You seem to imply that a demon and his Jinchuriki are one and the same. It is my understanding that Naruto is being discussed here, not the Kyuubi. I can tell you personally that a demon host and the creature he or she carries are two different entities. By implying that Naruto is the Kyuubi, are you saying that I am Shukaku? The entire council began shuddering from the eerie picture of the sand swirling around Gaara and the immense chakra and killing intent he was radiating. Danzo made a signal to the Anbu, but none of them were stupid enough to make a move. They knew what Gaara was capable of. We meant no offense, Kasuke-sama, the root commander replied silkily. He would need to be smooth here or he would be crushed by a coffin made of sand. However, you no longer have a demon, and Naruto has tamed his. Gaara cut him off. Uzumaki Naruto has done what no other Jinchuriki in history has done. I would have never even dreamed of attempting the same with Shukaku. And I'm willing to bet that none of the other Jinchuriki in the world have done what Uzumaki Naruto has. If you execute him because of the simple fact that he possesses the nine-tailed fox, I will slaughter you all myself. Kasuke-sama, I will ask that you watch your mouth within these chambers. Danzo shouted. Are you threatening this council? Gaara grinned. It was the insane, bloodthirsty grin of when he had been at his killing worst. Tsunade could see it was a show, but by the look on Danzo's face, he didn't. Maybe she should find a new root commander? But the Kasuke raises a good point, Tsunade spoke suddenly. All attention in the room focused on her. If you execute Naruto because of that simple fact, you will find all of his friends after your collective hides. Myself among them. You know of my relationship with him. The old farts shifted again. Indeed, they all knew. It was well known that the Godem Hokage thought of the Kyuubi brat as a little brother. She grinned, just as savagely as Gaara. And, since the Kyuubi will die if Naruto dies, I don't think the fox will let you get the chance. You can either harness the fantastic strength Naruto now possesses, or you can try to execute him and get slaughtered by the Kyuubi, myself, all Naruto's friends, and, if his answer is anything to go by, the Kasuke and Suna. She stared at each of them in turn. Do you believe you can take on an entire village? The councilmen spoke among themselves, too low for the Hokage and Kasuke to hear. Finally, Danzo turned around. Tsunade was pleased to see the root commander didn't look too happy. It is the decision of this council to spare Uzumaki Naruto's life. Gaara and Tsunade exchanged relieved looks. Looks like neither of them would have to follow up on their threats, even if they were semi-bluffs. However, Uzumaki Naruto must pass one test. Tsunade cocked an eyebrow. Oh? And what would that be? Danzo grinned, and it wasn't a nice one. He must fight a warrior of the council's choice. If he fails, he will be banished from Konoha. If he passes, he will be reinstated to the rank he previously held before leaving Konohagakure. He will also not be allowed to access the Kyuubi's power. We will see to it that Jiraiya-sama seals the creature's chakra away until the conclusion of the battle. Danzo tilted his head. Do these conditions satisfy you, Hokage-sama and Kasuke-sama? Tsunade and Gaara smirked. Uzumaki Naruto lives for challenges like these, Gaara stated, confident that his first friend would come through with no real trouble. The Kasuke is right, Tsunade agreed. So, don't keep us in suspense any longer. Who will Naruto be fighting? Danzo leveled his finger. Straight. At. Her. The fifth was stunned. She had to fight her little brother? Damn these snakes. She had been too hasty. She should have waited for them to name who the council had chosen. You cannot be serious. Unfortunately, Tsunade-hime, we are quite serious. It was the old man with the glasses. He'd been one of Sarutobi-sensei's closest allies on the council. Since the Sandaime had been checking up on Naruto since the Yondaime had died, the old man had been in contact with the boy more often than he would have liked and, despite himself, started to see the container as human instead of the demon reincarnated. You are also expected to go all out, Hokage-sama, Danzo added. We will be watching. We will know if you give anything less than your all. Is that it? Tsunade growled angrily at the council. How dare they manipulate her? They were her advisors, not her commanders. She was Hokage. What she said. Calm down, she told herself. They have to honor their end just as much as I have to honor mine. The slug Sanin smiled cheerfully at the council before leaving to tell the others what was going on. Wouldn't it be great to blow the council's scheme straight to hell? It was clear what they were doing. They were doing everything they could to make sure that Naruto failed. Had Naruto been a kid still, it might have worked, but now he was in his 20s and had been training for 7 straight years. Who knew how much he'd picked up in that span of time? The fifth wasn't sure she could beat him. Even without Kyuubi, he was freakishly powerful. Even as a teenager. Now, with 5 years of living by himself and, obviously, killing by himself, could she beat him? She didn't want to lose to the brat. She'd done that once already and Naruto had the necklace to prove it. The council wanted her to go all out? Fine. Naruto had just better have a greater 100% than she did. Naruto was having the best time he could remember since before leaving the village. All of his friends had stopped by to see him. Sure, he wasn't with Ba-chan, arguing his case before those fools on the council, and he was locked in the tower, but that didn't mean people couldn't climb through the window Ba-chan had forgotten to close. They were ninjas after all. So we had to lug Choji to the hospital to get his stomach taken care of. Again, Shikamaru finished. Everyone roared with laughter. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't have been funny, but just being able to talk to Naruto after 5 years made everything humorous. Man, you haven't changed a bit, have you, Choji? Naruto said, still chuckling. Eating out that barbecue joint you guys always go to, he shook his head. He was leaning casually against the Hokage's desk with his arms crossed, but still gave off that aura of constant alert that all shinobi above Chunin had. The other man, still having the same outfit he'd worn 5 years ago, grinned and scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Shikamaru, in keeping with his laziness, hadn't changed either. So, Naruto-kun, Tenten asked, have you learned to use any weapons? The blonde shinobi shrugged. No, not really, but I know how to use a katana if I have to, he replied. I tend to use ninjutsu more than anything. Tenten looked a little put out. Would no one share her interest in weaponry of all shapes and sizes? She pouted for show, crossing her arms over her red traditional tunic with gold embroidery and floral pattern on her shoulder. She thought that it went with her navy blue pants quite nicely. Really, Tenten, Neji said with a sigh. The girl just couldn't figure out why no one else loved weapons as much as she did. When will you learn that not everyone likes to rely on weapons? Naruto cracked a grin. You mean like the Hyuga rely on Jukin? He asked with a supposedly innocent tone. He grinned at the Hyuga's scowl. It's true. Tsunade chose that moment to walk through the door. The room broke out into babble all at once. Well, is he good to go? Why do we have to go through this troublesome hearing? Can we eat? Tsunade held up a hand to silence the stem of bombardment of questions pertaining to Naruto's hearing. The blonde himself hadn't said much, heck, he hadn't even moved. He just stared at her with searching and serious blue eyes. Well, he said softly, but the room went dead quiet at his singular word. All eyes turned to her in expectation. She saw hope with Tenten and Sakura, guarded indifference from Neji, and lazy curiosity from Choji and Shikamaru. The council has decided that Naruto is to fight a warrior of their choosing. If you win, Naruto, you will be reinstated as a genin. If you lose, you will be banished from the village. Ignoring the shocked looks, Naruto simply raised an eyebrow. It was downright creepy for Tsunade to see the blonde actually being serious. You will have no help. Neither exterior or, here she gave him a pointed look, interior. Naruto's eyes widened slightly, and one of his hands convulsed on his stomach, the place where Kyuubi was sealed. Who am I fighting? He asked simply. Tsunade sighed. This was the part she didn't want to answer, but it was better for him to be ready than to come and be surprised. If he was surprised, he would be apt to make a mistake that would cost him the battle. Me. Everyone's eyes went wide now. No exceptions. Tsunade didn't meet the blonde's eyes as she continued, don't ask for me to try and change it. I can't. I agreed to this and the constitution says that if both the cage and the council agree to it, neither party can back out. This is non-negotiable. I'm sorry. Don't be, Ba-chan. Those 3 words made her look him in the eye. She was shocked beyond all words when she saw Naruto's expression. The Jinchuriki wore a soft smile and his eyes were sad. It was Arashi's smile the night before he died. With his long hair and overall resemblance to his father, it was as if Arashi was forgiving her from beyond the grave. You couldn't have known. I'm sure that those fools didn't tell you until you had already agreed. Am I right? Yes. They didn't tell me until I agreed. Now Naruto's soft smile morphed into his trademark shit-eating fox grin, shattering his resemblance to his dad. I guess I'll have to kick your old and withered ass. Tsunade was dumbfounded. Was he really that stupid? He had to fight her. And here she was thinking he had matured. Then she spotted the slight shake in his hands as they braced him against the desk and it hit her. He was nervous. He realized the position they were both stuck in. But he was putting on a brave face. Why? Probably so his friends didn't think he was a coward. Then again, it could have been his classic response. The battle with Kabuto came when she'd first met him to mind. Kabuto's scathing taunts were met only by endless defiance from Naruto. The same thing was being done here. Hey, you couldn't kick my ass if you tried well. She responded, with a grin to match his. I'll teach you to respect your elders. Now everyone was smiling at the two's antics. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to train. With that, Naruto strode from the desk to the window and leapt out without a second thought. Everyone watched as he moved with easy grace from rooftop to rooftop, never once stumbling like some shinobi did. Are you sure you're up to this? Kit? Kyuubi's voice echoed in his head, you're strongest when we work together. I know that, Naruto responded out loud. Sometimes it just helped his thought process to talk out loud to the fox. But I think I've come to rely on you too much. This is a good way for me to gauge how strong I really am. I'm gonna use the Yukai Cage Bunshin to make sure I'm not tempted. Suit yourself. The Kyuubi withdrew to watch his cage get ready for a fight that, for once, Naruto wasn't looking forward to. Tsunade was tense, but she was prepping for the fight as well. While Naruto may have been able to fight without preparation, for the Slug Princess, who wasn't exactly in her prime anymore, poring over the scarce medical records and the mission reports, looking for anything that might give her an edge in the battle. She didn't want Naruto banished from the village, but that didn't mean she would insult him by giving anything less than 100%, and the Hokage knew that Naruto would do the same. Rasengan, the bright blue sphere drilled deep into the boulder before exploding and shattering whatever was left. Naruto was training with the Just You because he hadn't used it for a while. Sure, he'd used it to counter Sasuke's Chidori, but that had been the first time in nearly 5 years. After he'd left, the blonde had avoided both Rasengan and Kachiyose no Jutsu, knowing that they were both too unique to him and would have led Arrow Sennin straight to him. Needless to say, after 5 years of non-use, his control over the Just You was shaky at best. Behind, that simple word from Kyuubi had Naruto whirling around, just in time to catch the Anbu poofing in. It had been close to a week since he'd found out he'd fighting Ba-chan for his right to wear the leaf Hirai 8. The masked shinobi stared at him and then spoke. His message was short and to the point. It is time. Come to the Chunin arena immediately. A second later and the Anbu had poofed away. Now all the time he'd spent training was about to be put to the test. He sighed and blurred out of sight. Tsunade was still poring over paperwork and mission reports on Naruto. There really wasn't all that much to go on. She would probably just have to grin and go for it. Hopefully Naruto would slip up and reveal something. If his recent battle with Sasuke was anything to go by, Naruto was a little adverse to taijutsu, which she was well known for. Naruto would know this, though, and would probably do everything in his power to avoid getting within her reach. A knock at the door made her look up from the report on Team 7's mission to Wave Country with that bridge builder. Speaking of Team 7, there was Sakura. Tsunade-sensei, Danzo-san says that it's time. You're supposed to go to the Chunin exam arena now. Why was Tsunade's mouth so dry? She nodded and stood, walking for the door, wondering what the battle would be like. Naruto was nervous, and he never got nervous before a battle. How would this turn out? Could he really throw a kunai at his beloved Ba-chan? Would she really break his jaw and skull in the same blow? The answer was given to him by no one. Yes, he could do it, and she would be trying to break him in half. He grinned, excited now. This would be one hell of a fight. But there was still one thing to take care of. Cage Bunshin no Jutsu. When the clone appeared, the copy promptly peeled off his shirt and the real Naruto bit his thumb to make it bleed. Now he inked out a very complex seal out onto the clone's back. It was a Tenma Fu, a demon seal. Kyuubi called it a simple one. Naruto called it a gigantic headache. The seal was easily more complex than the one that locked Kyuubi inside of him. A lot more complex. More dangerous too. If he screwed up one line, the seal would be ruined, and if he activated it, it would do something very bad. Looks good to me. The fox sent Naruto a quick burst of Yuki and he pressed it to the seal. It flamed a bright crimson before burning itself to the clone's back. At the same time, the gentle pressure in the back of Naruto's head vanished as the Kyuubi's essence was transferred to the clone. When the Bunshin finished twitching and convulsing, it turned around and regarded him. The eyes were red and slitted, like a cat's, and the whisker marks had thickened and darkened, now looking like real whiskers. The Bunshin's hair was also a little more wild and fluffy looking, more like fur than hair. Naruto just shook his head. This seal is always creepy. He looked the Kyuubi over. Do I always look like that when you give me your chakra? Don't ask me, brat, I don't have a mirror. The fox's voice was deep and bass-like. Are you going to go through with this or not? Yeah, I don't have a choice, and this is the best method I know of to keep me from being tempted to use your chakra. The possessed clone nodded and began to walk off. Kyuubi. Naruto's voice stopped him. What? Naruto reached into his backpack that he'd brought with him and pulled out the cloak he had worn when he'd first come back to Konoha, now minus the Auto Harayate plate. He tossed it to the fox, who promptly pulled it on and raised the hood, concealing his demonic features. Now the demon walked off, most likely to find a seat. Naruto. Now it was Naruto's turn to see who was calling him. It was Tsunade. Ba-chan. The Hokage smiled, keeping up a friendly appearance, despite the fact that they would be beating the crap out of each other in few minutes' time. The two began to walk into the stadium. Nervous? She asked. Naruto smirked. Not on your life. I'll mop the floor with you. Tsunade laughed and tapped the young man on the forehead. I'm not gonna make it easier for you. The end of the tunnel into the arena floor was fast approaching. They kept up their lively banter, each feeling their heart begin to pound. Now the pair stepped into the blinding sunlight and were met by the deafening cheers of a capacity crowd. Did they tell you that there would be spectators? Naruto murmured. No, this has to be Danzo's doing. You can see what he's trying to do, right? Yeah, for the root commander, he's not that subtle. He's hoping to see me banished or UKO'd so he has an excuse to execute me. Tsunade nodded, having reached the same conclusion. And you're not worried? Naruto shook his head with a knowing grin and nodded discreetly over her left shoulder. When she looked, she saw a familiar cloaked figure. Is that you? Sorta. It's Kyuubi possessing a shadow clone. Tsunade's eyes widened. How? Tenma Fu. Took the damn furball 3 weeks to make that one. He says the really complex ones take upwards of a year. A year? She couldn't believe her ears. Were the seals really that complex? If a simple one took 3 weeks. Well, when you were an immortal demon, time didn't really matter. A familiar senbon chewing Junin was waiting for them. Are you ready? Genma asked. He couldn't believe he'd been assigned to this. But what the council wanted, they got. It didn't matter what he thought. He saw their confirming nods. You both know the terms? Another pair of nods. Well then, begin when you're ready. I hope you're ready to get your ass kicked, Ba-chan. Both were starting to limber up, running through their various stretches. Yeah right. You better hope that I don't get my hands on you. Naruto shuddered. I'll mess you up. Now the two were ready. They walked to within a few feet of each other. Naruto stuck out his hand. May the best shinobi win, Ba-chan. Tsunade grinned and grasped his hand. They released and stood there. Tsunade was allowing her chakra to rise and hopefully overpower Naruto's, making him effectively paralyzed and an easy win for her. Those hopes were shattered when Naruto matched her easily. This would be tougher than she had originally predicted. And the fire shadow had known it would be tough to begin with. Her blonde opponent smirked at her. You're gonna have to do better than that, Ba-chan, Naruto called to her as their respective chakras continued to rise. Tsunade felt her eyes widening as the chakra match went on. He was almost as powerful as a Sannin. No wonder he'd been able to kill Orochimaru. Fine, it was time to stop with this little game and actually get down and dirty. The Hokage charged headlong into battle. Naruto could feel the strain in his bones as he continued to try and match the Sannin's power. He kept up a brave face even as he tried to dredge up the chakra to keep on par with her. The amount of chakra the old lady had was incredible. Ba-chan hasn't been slacking off for these last 5 years, he thought grimly. This was bound to be his toughest battle yet, bar none. I'm really gonna have to pull out all the stops to beat her. His eyes widened as his adoptive grandma sprinted straight at him, her fist cocking back to crack him in the jaw. If that landed, it would make this a very bad day. He jumped away, trying to put a little distance between him and the village's leader. Now Naruto pulled out a single shuriken. Time to show Granny Tsunade what tricks he'd learned while he'd been away. And he would start with one of the Sandame's favorites. Sakura let out a small gasp. Or several small ones. She recognized what was happening to her. Chakra paralysis. She was hyperventilating. A side effect to being in such close proximity to such powerful, clashing chakras. The only way to counter it was to try and match the offending power, but the pink-haired girl knew that that wasn't going to happen. The sheer amount of strength her blonde friend had developed was astounding. A gloved hand on her shoulder made her jump. Are you okay, Sakura? She turned to see who had spoken and came face to, Mask? Kakashi-sensei, what are you doing here? The question was stupid, she knew, but she just had to ask. Her former sensei's visible eye curved up in the one way she knew he was smiling. I just thought I'd come and see how everyone's favorite knucklehead is doing, he replied with a light tone, giving no indication that he was even the slightest bit affected by the two powerhouse chakras clashing down below. Now his eye grew serious. Maybe you should be away from all this, Sakura, he said. Who is fighting aside, I don't think you're taking the chakra levels very well. That was true. Kakashi could see that she wasn't reacting well at all. In the few moments he'd been watching her, she had grown pale and started to sweat. Sakura was one of the lucky ones though. The stadium had a capacity crowd, no doubt everyone wanting to see the fox brat get banished from the village. The civilians clearly were getting the worst of it. The masked shinobi could see more that one in the same state as his old student and even more who had passed out. No, Sakura replied, shaking her head, shocked that Kakashi could even suggest that kind of thing. I can't leave. Their conversation was cut short by a cry from the arena floor below them. Ninpo, Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The single shuriken Naruto had pulled out and thrown suddenly multiplied into many. Tsunade felt a jolt rip through her as the horde of shurikens spun towards her. Where had Naruto learned that one? Not the time to be worrying about that. She had to dodge, and the best jutsu for this was also one of the most basic. Kyuubi watched from the shadows of the stands as the brat's shuriken hit the big-chested woman full on. A long canine glinted as the demon's mouth pulled back into a smirk. He could smell the surprise from the woman all the way up here. His smirk vanished when the falling body exploded into a log and fell to the ground with a dull clunk. He felt a rush of pride when his cage didn't gape and gasp like all the fools around him did. Through the tenuous mental link he still had with Naruto, he felt the boy's concentration tighten and the blonde started looking all around for the Hokage. It had taken him damn near 3 years for the demon drill into Naruto that, when your opponent used the Kawarimi no Jutsu, you didn't gape like an idiot. You got your head out of your ass and started to look around. Did you teach him that? The voice came from behind the fox, but he didn't turn. He had caught the scent of toad oil a few minutes before. And if I did? Kyuubi asked in return. Jiraiya scowled at the demon's tone. Really, no respect from some people. Not that the toad hermit had expected it from a millennia-old demon who had come close to wiping out this very village. I just want to make sure that you aren't setting him up with all these jutsu only to sweep him aside in a year or two. The cloaked head turned to regard him and then it cocked to one side. Why would I do that? Damn, how much sarcasm could you load into 5 words? Just answer the question, you damn fox. Why Naruto even let you possess him, I'll never know. Jiraiya bit out. What lies did you tell him, huh? When Kyuubi spoke again, his tone was laced with the undercurrents of simmering anger. That's what I hate most about you damn humans. Always think that we demons tell nothing but lies. Tell me, Toadman, in your infinite wisdom, did you ever stop to consider the possibility that Naruto and I might have worked out a mutually beneficial deal? Jiraiya scoffed. Mutually beneficial deal? He repeated skeptically. Since when do demons make deals with humans? Next thing the old Sani knew, he was slammed up against the wall by a single clawed hand. I should squash you right now, tadpole. Kyuubi growled, a faint red vapor beginning to surround his form, but I won't. I gave Naruto my word that I would protect his friends just as fiercely as he would. Normally, you would be right and I would still be trying to find a way to get out of him. But his bastard father made sure I can't do that. Our inner coils have meshed together so badly, this is the only way I can leave. Say what you want about me, tadpole, but if there are two things I am, they are honorable and pragmatic. I found a way to make the best of my rather dismal situation, and I followed through. We Kitsune also keep our word. I told Naruto I wouldn't try to brush him aside and I fully intend to keep that promise. He abruptly released Jiraiya and the old man crashed to the ground. By the time he'd sat up, Kyuubi was already back at his old position, watching the match unfold below. But why? Jiraiya asked, to which he received no answer. Finally he got up and went to stand next to the fox. If he couldn't get a straight answer from Kyuubi, he decided, then he would have to take it up with Naruto at a later time. But it would have to wait until this match ended. Come on, Ba-chan, Naruto muttered to himself. Where the hell did you disappear to? He was looking everywhere, trying to see just where the fire shadow had gone to. There was no sign of her, and the blonde man couldn't pick out her chakra either. For some reason, he flashed on the first match he'd ever fought in, that thrice-damned bell exam with Kakashi-sensei and the original Team 7. How Kakashi had used Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu to catch Sasuke. A thrill surged through his system and he jumped back. The earth in front of him burst apart and a fist shot out, aiming for his gut. Thankfully, his jump and the resulting distance increase softened the blow. It still hurt like hell though, as he hurtled across the stadium to smash into the opposite wall with a massive dust cloud following his impact. He was winded and in considerable pain. Every breath hurt. He must have busted a rib or three. Damn Ba-chan's freaky strength. Too bad the furball wasn't here to help heal it. Tsunade pulled herself from the hole she dug. She didn't think she could pull it off, a Kawarimi into a Shinju Zanshu. But she had, and now her little brother was meshed in with the wall on the other side of the stadium. The crowd went crazy at her success in landing the first blow of the battle. Everyone, except those who knew Naruto well, figured that she would win without fail. Tsunade smirked at the notion. It would take more than a little tap to make the Yondaime's son go down for the count. There was one thing that Naruto never failed to do, and that was to be unpredictable. His use of her sensei's signature jutsu proved that. Even Sarutobi himself would have been caught off guard by that stunt. Now it was just a matter of time until Naruto did something else. The wait was a short one. No sooner than he'd peeled himself out of the wall, Naruto let loose another jutsu. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Now, the fifth was surrounded by a fair number of shadow clones, all of them looking ready to go on the offensive. Looks like it was time to show off a new jutsu of her own. Naruto grinned as he sprinted straight toward Ba-chan in the center of the ring of clones. This particular application served as both a way to make sure that she couldn't get away, and a setup for a jutsu that had yet to fail. Sasuke bastard had been so pissed the first time Naruto had unveiled it. Just as he caught sight of Tsunade, he skidded to a stop. She had a wicked grin on her face and was balanced on one foot, with the other sticking straight into the air. Crap, not good. Doden. Doryuzen. The second foot came crashing to the ground with such force that the impact sprayed rocks everywhere. The projectiles, along with the resultant rush of displaced air, dispelled every clone and sent the real Naruto tumbling. When the smoke cleared, Tsunade was standing in a fair-sized crater. Well, that worked. I never thought that I would be able to make up a jutsu on the fly like that. A groan caught her attention as Naruto picked himself up, holding his head like he had a concussion. Guilt ripped through the fire shadow and she promised herself that she would heal Naruto the first chance she got. Nice trick, Ba-chan, Naruto said, just loud enough for Tsunade to hear as he managed to stagger back upright. How the hell did you do it? She grinned with a certain amount of pride. My chakra. I got the idea from you, actually. At the blonde's puzzled gaze she elaborated, normally I would have kept the chakra to a minimum and controlled it. This time, I gathered as much as I thought I'd need and let it all explode on impact. Nice. Earth Dragon Strike, huh? Good name. Now let me show you an old favorite. He held a hand casually out in front of him. The air over his palm began to spin and swirl. Everyone's eyes focused on the blonde just before the Rasengan fully formed, spinning like a possessed hurricane over Naruto's palm. I'm not done. He took his other hand and began to tap the swirling blue sphere here and there. Tsunade was confused. Naruto had already shown her that he could do a one-handed Rasengan, so why was he using? Oh, shit, he was going to use his element. Fuuten. Rasengan. Now the sphere was swirling even faster, but with little blades of wind chakra spiking out from the surface here and there. This wasn't good. If that hit her, she would either die or lose this battle, whichever happened first. That new jutsu of hers was literally only a minute or two old. She'd used too much chakra on the first one to think about a second one, and she didn't have enough time to build up for a clone jutsu or a replacement. Just gonna have to deal with this head on. While everyone thought that Naruto's technique was flawless, the two beings who actually taught him knew different. The idiots lost it. Kyuubi commented, shaking his hooded head, he's trying that after not using it for 5 years? Damn fool. 5 years? Jiraiya asked skeptically. He hasn't used Rasengan for 5 years? And he can do it with one hand? He mimicked the Kyuubi, shaking his head at Naruto's foolishness. Using the advanced form of Rasengan after 5 years of non-use? This wasn't going to end well. The brats always had excellent chakra memory. Kyuubi replied, shocking the hell out of Jiraiya, who'd been expecting some smart-ass answer. Relearning Rasengan wouldn't be that hard for him. The problem is using only 2 hands for the element manipulation. He's always had to use a Kage Bunshin. Trying like that, now, of all times. He's asking for it. Both human and demon watched with bated breath as the blonde sprinted for Tsunade one more time. The fifth grinned as she thought of the perfect way for her to counter this situation. Memories of the past would help both of them out now. And this wouldn't take too much chakra either as an added bonus. Tsunade raised her hand, flat like a blade, and smashed it into the ground as hard as she could. The force of her chakra being released sent a huge fissure streaking towards Naruto, who saw it too late and stepped into the void that had suddenly opened beneath his feet. Naruto felt his stomach rise into his throat as his foot hit air. He pitched forward, and the Rasengan slammed headlong into the ground at the fifth's feet. An explosion rocked the entire arena as the blonde lost control of his jutsu and sent both combatants tumbling head over heels on the blast wave. When the smoke and dust finally settled, both Naruto and Tsunade were lying face down on the earth, a massive crater in the space between them. Tsunade grunted as she tried to push herself up to her feet and continue the fight. For some reason though, her body chose not to respond. She was conscious and still had chakra left. So why couldn't she move? The answer was simple, the explosion. The chakra backlash, combined with the blast, had taken its toll on her stamina. Ordinarily, she would be able to stand up, but with the stress of the past few weeks, what with the Auto invasion and her subsequent battle with the Uchiha traitor, added with the lack of sleep preparing for this very battle, meant that she wasn't at 100. A system of events that seemed insignificant in themselves, but added together meant that she couldn't move. Naruto wasn't faring much better. Ba-chan had been a few feet from the explosion. He'd had it in the palm of his hand. Now he was roughed up, cut up, and with several smashed ribs. Not to mention all the minor fractures that had to be all over his body. He sure felt like it. The blonde felt like he'd been run over a few times with Choji's meat tank. His mind felt like Ino had used her Shintention on it over and over and over. Simply put, he was whipped. The drain on his chakra had been substantial. Sure, he'd only used a few jutsu, but they were big ones, and, like everyone kept telling him, his chakra control wasn't that great. It was way better than it used to be, but it still sucked when compared to someone who had a similar amount of strength and skill. Come on Naruto, get your lazy ass up. The voice made him twist his head to see who the hell was yelling. It was Sakura. His eyes cleared somewhat and he felt the various aches dull. Are you gonna let this keep you away from the village? Well, no, he ground out, answering even though Sakura-chan couldn't hear him. I can't lose here, I won't. He pushed as hard as he could to raise his body even a few inches. More cheers greeted his efforts, every single one of them coming from his friends. You can do it, Ino shouted, sticking a defiant fist in the air. Since when are you a lazy bum? Shikamaru asked. He only slightly raised his voice. It was too damn troublesome to yell. We can go out for ramen. Choji and Iruka shouted together. I didn't train a stupid loser. Jiraiya screamed, so loud that the demon next to him had to cover his ears or go deaf for the rest of his life. If you do not succeed, I will kill you. That from both Neji and the Sand Trio. I'll give you a free katana. Tenten shouted. Maybe Naruto would like a nice new pointy object? The fire of youth is with you. No need to see who had shouted that one. Only Rock Lee would shout that. On and on it went, till the last one had called out to him. Become Hokage Naruto Aniki. The weary blonde looked straight up in front of him and saw a grinning Konohamaru along with Udon and Moegi. All three were screaming the phrase over and over. He looked down and somehow found the strength to shove himself onto his knees. Across from him, Tsunade had managed to get to her feet. Ba-chan did it, he thought. He grinned and dug deep down. And anything an old lady can do. A final, desperate shove, and he surged to his feet. I can do. Cheers split the sky as the entire stadium began screaming and stamping, calling encouragement to either Naruto or the Hokage. The two opponents grinned at each other. I don't know about you, Naruto, Tsunade called to him, but I don't have any chakra left. One last blow? Yeah, one last blow to decide it all. The two ran at each other and drew back. A hush fell over the crowd as duo closed on each other. This was it. Would Naruto stay, or go? The seconds dragged on. For Naruto and Tsunade, the world around them faded as their fists sailed toward the other's face, in seeming slow motion. They crashed together and the world went white.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.